the Yoked Show. And as we get started with the broadcast, we will get started here in a moment. Of course, we've got a lot to cover from yesterday's conversation as we spoke. I've reached out to YouTube and there's no issues with the account, apparently. There's no technical difficulties. However, we're just going to go for it. This is the Equally Yoked broadcast. And of course, if you are here for the first time, you can email me your thoughts concerning any of the things that we cover on this live stream, freedom@equallyyokeshow.com. And I'll pin that in the chat as we begin to get this conversation started. And I want to know what time it is, where you're living, because I always find that to be interesting as to what the deal is with everybody that's watching on this channel, why you're up so late, or why, just what part of the country you are of, either United States or Canada or wherever, because I like to know where my audience is and the sort of input that we're getting here. And it just helps sort of gauge everything in that respect. So freedom@equallyyokeshow.com. I'm going to leave that in the pinned. I'm going to leave that pinned. And thank you for that, Marissa. Appreciate that. This is the email. So look, what we've been discussing here and the conversations surrounding alien technology and aliens is undoubtedly one of the top conspiracies from the Roswell incident, the sightings around Area 51, viral videos and strange objects that we've been, that we've seen in the sky, especially the ones that go viral online. Now, mankind has always had a fascination over these things. And undoubtedly, we know that this sort of fascination comes with the question, the age-old question is, and it's common amongst atheists, but the question is, with such a vast universe, how could we be the only intelligent life forms to exist? For me and others, me being a Christian, this actually reveals just how special humanity is, being that God created us in his like image and no other. Now, if you remember the other day when we covered this broadcast here, or this interview with Barack Obama, you saw that he was asked about the question of aliens. And his answer was somewhat surprising, I guess. He says that he knows that aliens exist, but he's never seen them. But not only that, we're going to get into the video where Laura Trump, this is Trump's daughter-in-law, who says that Trump may be revealing or having a sort of announcement soon. Now, what that announcement is, we don't know. However, we're going to get into this video clip and let's play it for you. This is Obama talking about this matter.
They're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in, what is it?
Area 51.
Area 51. There's no underground facility unless there's this enormous conspiracy and they hid it from the President of the United States.
What was the first question you wanted answered when you became president?
Where are the aliens?
So this is Barack Obama. This is his response. And we sort of thought this was a bit of a joke. And in a sense, it kind of is. But when you're looking more into what is being said online, is simply this conversation is beginning to sort of grow more and more about aliens. Laura Trump says this on her broadcast. I think this is her broadcast, and this is from her YouTube channel, which I imagine this is hers, Laura Trump. Okay, so this is directly from her YouTube channel, where she was asked the question about aliens. Do you or Trump, what do you say about aliens? Essentially, the question that she is being asked here, and here's her response.
I hear that the president has something in the queue to share with us about all of this. Now, truth be told, I'm trying to remember how long ago it was. It may have been right after he left office, after the first term. I remember Eric being like, all right, what can you tell us? And he was a little hesitant to give us any real info, which makes me think like he's got a lot of info out there and he's waiting for the right time to drop it. And maybe this is going to be the time, because I keep seeing all these stories about how he's got some like UFO speech that he's got queued up, and we all should just kind of sit back and wait. Now, here's the thing I'll say. What do I know about UFOs? What I know is that our universe is so enormous. It actually, if I start thinking about it, it makes me a little crazy.
Now, she asks the right sort of question here, or even poses what is a sort of the formulation of a question where she begins to think, well, if I start to think about the universe, her mind can go in all sorts of different ways, just as much as ours do, where we begin to see scientists for decades have always said there's a possibility of life in this star, I don't know, 1,000 light years away, whatever the number was. And they could never confirm it. These were only, I don't know, theories or suggestions within the scientific realm. And this conversation has always been sort of the top sort of conspiracy of them all, when presidents or officials, U.S. officials, were asked about extraterrestrials, were asked about UFOs. And even the word UFOs has sort of been, the new term that is being used, which is UAP, which is probably a more accurate term to use. But with these UFOs, these unidentified flying objects, and this sort of conversation surrounding extraterrestrials is growing more and more. And so what we saw with Caroline Leavitt, and in a press briefing where she's asked about this specific clip of Laura Trump, this is what she says. She was kind of surprised by this and basically says, well, I hope, it would come to my surprise. I would like to know. And let's take a look at Caroline Leavitt's response concerning this. And if you guys haven't yet, please consider liking the show and subscribe to the broadcast. This is equallyyokeshow.com. freedom@equallyyokeshow.com. You can email me your thoughts concerning aliens, extraterrestrials, the Bible, life, whatever you want. And for those that are not joining in the chat, please join in on the chat, as I will be reading your discourse throughout the live stream. And so, of course, what we've also been hoping to do is to push past more and more. So if you guys can, please give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already, because the majority of those that watch this channel are indeed not subscribed, about 93%. And so here's Caroline Leavitt and her response concerning this. This is what she says. Actually, she's asked by a reporter. And by the way, if the audio is a little bit off, sorry about that. Just keeps jumping between videos.
President Barack Obama, Caroline, was recently asked if aliens are real. He says they're real, but he hasn't seen them. The president's daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, told Miranda Devine of the New York Post that the president has a prepared speech on this issue that he prepares to deliver at the right time. Is that true? And does the Trump administration believe aliens are real?
Well, a speech on aliens would be news to me. That sounds very exciting, though. I'll have to check in with our speech writing team. And that would be of great interest to me personally, and I'm sure all of you in this room, and apparently former President Obama, too. So we'll keep you posted on that.
So that was pretty much the end of the conversation there. Whether the government is being a little cryptic here, and maybe they are queuing up some type of speech concerning extraterrestrials, concerning life outside of this earth. Now, we know as believers, and we understand that God throughout the scriptures has really focused on humanity, or rather the redemption of humanity, not the redemption of any other life form, not even the redemption of animals, creatures, living things, anything of that nature. But the single focus is on the redemption of humanity. And that is because God has created us very unique in that we are created in his image. And this is very key to our understanding as to who God is and why we are here, our purpose. And so I want to know your thoughts. And there's one more clip that I have queued up for you concerning this. And this is actually from 5 years ago. And this is from NBC, mind you, NBC, with basically saying that an Israeli former space security chief claims aliens exist and Trump knows too. And this is sort of the opening statement there. And we're not really going to go into the video. However, it's just an interesting conversation, an interesting data point to put out before you as we continue this broadcast. Now, as always, like the show, get those likes in so we can push this video out to YouTube and get it 2026 and 2028. These are all very important aspects to our day-to-day politics. Now, here we go. This is a clip here, as I mentioned just a moment ago.
Aliens exist and President Trump knows about it. That's according to Israel's former space security chief. In an interview with an Israeli newspaper, he said the aliens have been waiting until today for humanity to develop and reach a stage where we will understand in general what space and spaceships are. NBC News chief global correspondent Bill Neely explains this one.
So, again, when it comes to alien life forms, or if aliens exist, there's so much that is kept away from humanity in the sense of the general population when it comes to the government, potentially hiding things from it's funny because if you guys remember way back when on the Family Guy show, we saw Brian and Stewie. They were going through different, sort of scenarios as to what would happen with humanity if, such and such happened. So in one of the worlds, it was that Christianity didn't exist, or something to the effect of the government. I have to go back. Maybe I can find it. We can pull it up while we're watching one of these clips that I have pulled up for you. It might be interesting to go back and it's just funny. It's just funny. I don't know why I just recalled back to that. And I don't really watch Family Guy, but that was years and years ago. And so you say, what do you mean if? Catch up, bro. Now, I have a very wild take, a take that might not be popular with folks that don't believe in the Bible, with folks that, might think that I'm just being a little bit weird or strange, but I think the sort of demonic, rather alien or extraterrestrial sightings that people have seen, and maybe if there is any type of evidence, is possibly humanity coming in contact with demonic beings, that or even Nephilim. And so this is something that is a topic to go through when going through the book of Genesis, when going through, other scriptures in the Bible concerning this. Now, what we do know is that in the last days, Jesus mentions the fact that as in the days of Noah is going to be the same sort of things. We might be seeing Nephilim again. We don't know. I mean, Nephilim essentially just means giant. And when you go to the moment where Israel's to go into the promised land, Moses sends out the spies, and the spies bring back the report that there are giants in the land. Now, only 2 are saying, hey, God has given us this land. Like, we can do this. And again, a topic for another day. And so there's so much when it comes to the God and his creation and what we know, what we don't know, that will be revealed at the end of time. But otherwise, I say at the end of time, that is really at the end of the time of this earth, as God will create it all new, create the heavens and the earth. He will create all things new at the end of it. You can see that in the book of Revelation. So thoughts on peeing in the pool is absolutely disgusting. Don't pee in the pool. So anyway, so as we continue on here, and maybe I can pull up the clip for a moment while I let folks to sort of join in on the conversation. I want to know your thoughts otherwise concerning aliens and extraterrestrials. Do you guys have any sort of personal things, personal testimony about aliens? But my dad has shared with me some strange stories, stories that, I mean, if I tried to basically recall them at the sort of detail that he gave me at the time, this was years ago, but basically, in short summary, he was sleeping in his bedroom. He was woken up by like a light shining through, a sort of colored light shining through his bedroom window. And he went outside to go check. I believe he went outside to go check, and he saw figures that were like towering over him, just looking at him. And then he woke up back in his bed. I don't know. I don't know whether that is, that's his sort of personal testimony. I want to know what you guys have thought concerning that stuff. You say only Ethiopia has a full Christian Bible with all 88 books, including the Book of Enoch. Now, these other books, such as the non-canonical books, such as the Book of Enoch, such as others like the Apocryphal, they're known as the Apocryphal, but these other books are not included in the canon because they're not inspired, or the those that sort of formalized the canon into what we know as the 66 books in the Christian Bible. They believe these to not be, or these 66 to be inspired by the Holy Spirit. Now, the other books, the apocryphal books, were also they were checked and examined to make sure that these weren't actual books that were to be included in the canon. And they found this out because a lot of these books were written, some of them were written during the what's known as the silent years, the 400-year period from Malachi to Matthew. And so these were Jewish literature that would have been sort of cohesive with the sort of literature of the day. And amongst others that we've seen with like the Book of Enoch, and even the Enumalish, the sort of emerald tablets, all this stuff that we can get into again on another topic. Just sort of interesting that you guys point that out. Of course, it sort of ties into aliens, and it ties into this stuff. We've even seen the what do you call it? Pictographs. I think that is the correct term on some of the hieroglyphics, rather, not pictographs, hieroglyphics that were written on that you can see in Egypt, of like helicopters and UFO looking, shapes and all these different things. And I believe those were already debunked. I think somebody has gone over what they actually mean. I guess we have to just go back and find out who that was. Now, if anybody remembers that that episode of Family Guy, I think this might be it. It's basically where Peter Griffin and not Peter Griffin, Stewie and Brian time travel. And even then, I don't even know if that even if that even is appropriate, given the content. Yeah, I'm gonna have to find that. So anyway, if anybody knows, I don't know. it's a random sort of subject. But so email me your thoughts, freedom@equallyyokeshow.com. And we've got some of these clips that we have lined up. And the clips that we have lined up concerning midterms, concerning the 2028 elections. Leandra, you say, do you think these aliens are fallen angels? It's a very high possibility, given the sort of the insight into the spiritual realm, and sort of the again, when you have people who involve themselves in psychedelic drugs, when people that sort of are involved in that world. Look, drugs are sort of this, in a sense, a gateway into the spiritual realm. And it's always fascinating where you see people where, they're talking on the streets, talking to nobody. They're talking just, they're screaming, they're yelling at what appears to be a person when there's nobody there. I believe that these psychedelic drugs and any sort of drugs that cause you to hallucinate and all this stuff that really scramble up your mind is the person engaging themselves within the spiritual realm, not knowing what they actually, what they actually did. And we've seen this with people that are also appear to be possessed. And it just leaves room to this stuff. I mean, hasn't really, it probably hasn't even been studied as to the sort of aspects of the spiritual realm and those who take drugs that cause them to have a scrambled mind, and sort of the mental issues that we deal with. Now, of course, some of the mental issues such as schizophrenia and other things, you say DMT is supposed to help you see a different dimension, but I wouldn't know. Yeah, crazy stuff about DMT. There's this movie that came out about DMT. I don't remember what it's called, but it's basically like visualizing what the trip looks like. It was like old movie, but I do believe that psychedelic drugs, and because when you look at the word in the scriptures that is used, the translation is pharmakia, and I think it's sorcerers, right? Sorcerers, you translate that specific word, and it translates to pharmakia, which also means psychedelics, or even, I'll say this for YouTube's sake, corn, right? This can also be utilized for that in that type of context, if I'm not mistaken. However, this is where even the word that stems off of that is porneia, right? And anyway, to go into that sort of realm where sorcery is involved, where psychedelics are involved, or pharmaceutical drugs are involved, you're allowing yourself to see into the spiritual realm, and it's not going to be a good sort of, it's not going to be a good experience for you. We also know that Saul, who attempted to look, even things like necromancy, things that were also, that God tells the Jews to stay away from, explicitly tells the Jews to stay away from because of what the pagans and the Gentiles were practicing. And even with talking to dead spirits, right? This was also a practice where you would pay somebody to contact the dead. And we see this instance where God allows for a moment the one of the prophets to come back and speak to King Saul. And King Saul was given a warning that he would die immediately after his encounter with the prophet that he was attempting to contact. So we know that there is a spiritual realm that can be seen so long as God allows people to see the spiritual realm. And we've seen this with Isaiah, Ezekiel, some folks that were given even in John, even with John, where he's on the island of Patmos and he's sort of now seeing the spiritual realm. We have somebody in the chat named Psychedelic Lord. Interesting that you had joined in on the conversation. Maybe what I'm saying brings different people from different backgrounds on the show. I don't know. Interesting. Maybe it recommends you. However, when we're talking about what these men saw and the sort of insight that they were given into the spiritual realm, they saw in many cases, they would see an angel of the Lord. They would see God and his throne. They would see these cherubim, these seraphim, and these beings. And in other cases, you see that they're having visions, they're having dreams, and God is very explicit in explaining that. But in the cases where you see that some of these men are having a literal vision, just sort of going about their day, even Daniel talks about these instances where they begin to describe what they see, and when you read what they're describing, you don't even understand what the heck they're trying. It sounds like you're listening to somebody on drugs. And not only that, you're trying to translate from another language as to what they're saying into English. And you're not getting this sort of full experience as to what they actually saw. Because he said that no words can describe what I even saw. It would be illegal if I tried to describe it. And so all this stuff is very interesting. Now, going to the subject of politics, back to the subject of politics, I could talk about this stuff all day long. And so the Democratic Party will say and do anything to get the people's vote, and they don't care what it takes. We've seen this. But even if they lie, and as soon as they get into office, they will do the opposite of what they've promised. The voters in Virginia are sort of backtracking on Spanberger. Even the voters in New York who voted for Zoran Mamdani, they're backtracking because of the policies that he's trying to implement in the case of more property taxes, more taxing of the rich. And you're seeing these 50 new tax proposals done by Spanberger, which I think are actually implemented. And we're going to look at some of comments from somebody who talks about this in a moment. But not only that, do we see this message conveyed very strongly by Andy Beshear. Now, Andy Beshear is the Kentucky governor, and he is in he's in the polls for the nominees for 2028, but he's at the very bottom at 1%, and he's clearly not doing a very good job. Now, if he's planning to run, I don't know, and so we will see if indeed this is. Let's see here. I think this is going to be the clip here, and we're going to sort of build this out for you so you understand where the Democratic Party comes, where their point of view is. Okay, let's hear Andy in his own words.
And how do you respond to a Democratic voter who might say, I like you, I like your track record in a red state or red Commonwealth, but you're too soft-spoken?
First, yes, that message is working. Look at Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill, who ran great key. I believe that the American people want stability, that Donald Trump is exhausting. Many Americans feel like the pendulum swung too far during the Biden administration and has swung way too far during the Trump administration. And what they want is an America where they can wake up every morning and not be worried about its future. And I think they want leadership that's focused on them, on whether they make enough money to not only afford their groceries, but take their kids on that vacation that they went on as kids. That young couple wants to be able to afford their first home around the same age as their parents. People want to feel safe in their communities, believe their kids are going to great public schools. Those are the types of things that I think are not only appealing to the American people, but maybe can help us heal, to recognize that most of our concerns are the same, that our neighbor is not the enemy from within. She's just our neighbor doing her best in a tough world.
Now, the reality of the position from the Democrat side and what they begin to run their campaigns on is they begin to run their campaigns based on a sort of, moderate sort of center, political ideology where they don't seem or appear to be too radical, where they begin to walk back their sort of statements, or rather not even walk back their statements, but avoid making statements. And then only then until they get into office, what we see is just that. Now, the Democratic Party, this shows us just how they aren't consistent. But he begins to talk about, this is another example. He begins to talk about a fair election. And let's take a look.
The president talking about not federalizing elections. He first said Republicans should take over elections in certain states. That is anti-democracy. But Democratic governors and AGs are ready to stand up and make sure we have full and fair elections. But I'll say this. If you try to intimidate the American people, especially when it comes to something so foundational as voting, I think you're underestimating them. I think you'd see huge lines and people singing. People want to be Americans first, and Democrats or Republicans second, third, or fourth. You put our democracy at jeopardy. You try to intimidate them from voting, and they will step up and protect this country.
No, but the reality is I don't think any American is feeling that they are, what's the word he uses here, that to underestimate them, and that they are going to be intimidated by this act of implementing the Save America Act. Now, Trump also mentioned that he was going to make it a priority by executive order if the Senate does not pass the Save Act, which there may very well be this passage here in a moment or in the coming days. However, what we're witnessing by the level of inconsistency by Andy Beshear, however his name is pronounced, he literally talks about a free and fair elections. And this is exactly why Trump and many Democrats and Republicans, even the majority of Americans, as reported by CNN, conducted by a poll by white Americans, black Americans, and I forget the other category that they used, but basically saying that everybody literally, the majority actually agrees with this. 75% of Americans, I think the numbers were 75, 85, around those numbers, where people actually agreed with this. Now, others are saying, look, if we need IDs, and even Caroline Levitt, and we're actually going to, might as well pull the clip for you since we went over it earlier from the press briefing, talking about IDs. And let's hear her comments concerning this, and somebody asking about the Save American Act, the ID situation, and what's happening with that in Senator John Thune.
And the SAVE Act IDs. Both of these could get solved in 15 minutes if Senate Leader John Thune simply got rid of this phony 60-vote cloture rule and got 51 votes, and that would be the end of it, because everyone in this room knows if the Democrats take over, they'll get rid of that rule in 90 minutes. They already tried it one time, and the two Democratic senators that stopped it are no longer there, Manchin and Sinema. President Trump is backing a lot of these senators for re-election, and yet they will not get rid of the 60-vote cloture rule, which is holding everything up. What is the president's position on John Thune in the Senate finally getting rid of this so this legislation can get moved?
Well, the president has a good relationship with Senate Majority Leader John Thune. They keep in very close contact, and they work together all of the time. I hear your passion in your voice, and I know it's shared by many Americans across, but also privately in his conversations with Senate Majority Leader Thune and many other members of Congress as well. Yes, Rav, go ahead. Good to see you.
As she mentioned there, that and I think she even touched up on it. Let me see here. And I might have missed it because I was messing with some settings here, but basically talking about that we use IDs to purchase alcohol. We use IDs to board a plane. All these different aspects of our daily lives in America is just as simple as that. We utilize identification in order to move about our daily lives. And so this is not something that is taboo, and it's something that shouldn't be taboo to require IDs in order to just simply verify that you are an American citizen. Now, there's ways that they will begin to implement this. And Catwalk, you say we use IDs for everything. Exactly. We use IDs to drive. It's something as simple as what we do every day on a day-to-day basis. So identification is most certainly necessary, and something that I think is common sense. But going back to what Andy was talking about on this clip is the inconsistency. As A. Matthews pointed out, the bait and switch, that it's not about being consistent. It's about them being deliberate in their deception. That is ultimately, yes, that is absolutely true, and that they are deliberately being deceptive. However, when they get into office, they will then show their full colors. You also mentioned that we use IDs at our doctor's offices. 100%. And so, again, this is all the tactic of the Democrats as they move forward in the midterms to basically say, look at the Trump administration and look how bad they're doing, when even J.D. Vance, and I actually wasn't going to play this clip on this broadcast, and maybe I should, but he basically talks about the undoing of the last administration and how much work it's taking to sort of get to a point to where we're witnessing a sort of affordable America, the point in which we are finally, as the term is used, not instant gratification, but delayed gratification. We are then having that moment of realizing that gratification effect that we were temporarily holding off our sort of desires and what we want immediately in order to benefit from holding off later in the future. And so this goes with things such as saving money for something, right? You'll benefit from saving that money early on. Later, and it's just a simple thing. Now let's get his comments concerning this, here it is around this portion of the interview.
Americans much less wealthy and much less safe, or do you want to double down on the president's leadership, which has helped us recover from some of the problems caused by Joe Biden, and then has built a lot on top of it? Because so much of what we've done over the last year are things that are going to pay long-term dividends for the American people. $18 trillion of new investment. That's factories being built. That's wages going up. A 20% reduction in murder rate. We've obviously secured the border, and we've got a lot of criminals out of this country in the process. So there's a lot to run on. There's a lot to talk about. But Martha, there's still so much to do. And I think it's up to us. It's up to me. It's up to the president. It's up to the entire team to make the argument to the American people that we've made your life better. And if you give us another couple of years of Republican governance, we can keep on building upon that record.
So your family is expanding. You're going to have a new child.
We are.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
In July. A lot of young families are having trouble buying a house.
Of course.
And
which, by the way, is one of the topics that we've discussed on this show, which we want to focus more on sort of these ideas of affordability, these ideas of how to make America great, truly from the ground up, on how to do this. Now, the conversation that he mentions here concerning this, on this question that he's asked, is going to get into that very point that we discussed about the bad policies that we're undoing. Somebody by the name of Sage is saying, the one thing I enjoy is voting absentee. I wonder how you would move forward with ID and absentee. It would suck to have to stand in line to physically vote. Now, I think this is a part of our duty and our responsibility in order to elect who we want to elect, rather than just removing opportunities for fraud to happen. That's really the way that we want to avoid issues and have free and fair elections. And what Democrats and Republicans, again, a sort of an issue that should be common ground for all of us. This shouldn't be a bad thing.
I'm wondering if in the State of the Union, not to get ahead of the president's speech next week, but will we hear any sort of hard incentives, a tax incentive, a program where if you're going to buy your first house, we're going to make your taxes lower? Anything along those lines? Will we get that?
Well, the president's actually articulated a number of ways to make housing more affordable, especially for young Americans who want to start a family, want to raise that family in a house that they own. I think that's a critical part of the American dream. One of the president's proposals he came out with just a couple of weeks ago, actually, was to stop institutional institutional investors from buying homes that should go to American families and to American citizens. That's going to make housing more affordable. But the president has also driven home the most important thing that we can do to make housing more affordable is to actually lower interest rates. Right now, because of the Federal Reserve, we have interest rates that are still way too high, even though inflation has come down. Frankly, it's come down faster than people thought it would under the Trump administration, and yet the Federal Reserve is keeping interest rates stubbornly high. That means if you go and apply for a mortgage, you're paying much more for that mortgage than you should. So we're going to make it easier to build and create homes. We're going to make it easier for Americans rather than Wall Street to buy those homes. But we also need to get interest rates lower. That's a critical part of the president's agenda.
What do you say to people who say, well, I'm not sure I should have a third or a fourth child because it's too expensive?
Well, one, I hear them, and I know a lot of young American families are actually deciding not to have kids or delaying kids. I mean, look, what I would say is it's never a good time in the sense that it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be easy. I know as the father of three with a fourth on the way, there are always going to be challenges. But I don't know anybody who chose to have another kid who regretted it. Even sometimes if it was financially difficult, it often is. I think babies are a good thing, and I think if we have more of them in this country, the country will be much better.
Well, thanks for doing.
As God says that, children are a blessing. And somebody, A. Matthews says Election Day should be a federal holiday we all take off. I mean, that would be amazing. Amazing for us to just partake in that sort of simple, basic act of voting in order to put people who we want to elect into office and not have it done by fraudulent activities. Now, you say, thank God we have Vance and not Waltz, and you're right, because if you think about it, it's so funny how much we actually dodged a bullet by Waltz not being elected with Kamala Harris. And Kamala Harris, mind you, as we were going to be looking at the polls, the polls show that Kamala Harris is 39%. And so looking at the potential Democratic nominees for the 2028 presidential election, we're met with politicians who really aren't in touch with their base. So as we said, Kamala Harris, 39%, Gavin Newsom sitting at 21%, AOC sitting at 10%, Pete Buttigieg or Buttigieg or whatever his name is 7%, Josh Shapiro 7%, Mark Kelly at 6%, Gretchen Whitmer at 4%, JB Pritzker at 3%, Andy Bashir, who we just played on the clip earlier, at 1%, and John Ossoff at 1%. Now, we also saw a Democrat, James Tellerico, go on the show with James Colbert, and the reports are that this was removed from the they pulled this show. They actually didn't air the show. This was pre-recorded. They didn't air it. And we might be looking more at that information as the statements come out. And even as Jasmine Crockett, who's really receiving so much backlash because she was basically saying, look, this is not the government's fault. This is actually, something else that's going on behind the scenes. We're looking to Paramount for an official statement, is what Jasmine Crockett says. So she's actually defending what people say that she's defending Donald Trump. She's probably not going to say that herself, but otherwise, that's sort of what's going on behind the scenes. Now, AOC, Gavin Newsom, and Andy have been very prominent in the media as of late, really showcasing who they are. But the reality is they will say, and they will act on anything that will get them an election, only to defraud the Americans when they are in office. Now, let's take a look at AOC and what she's been doing at the Munich Security Conference and this sort of conversation talking about the rise of populism. Now, this is sort of the Donald Trump is the wrench in the system where he's beginning to he moved the American people, the youth, in a different direction to want to put America first. And let's just hear for a moment of what she says at this conference. And she doesn't, seem to know geography, geopolitics. And not only that, does she tell us, she basically tells us, how she was elected into Congress to change. And she wanted to sort of be the change she wanted to see. I guess that common, proverb of man. And so this is her sort of rambling a little bit, which it's just funny. Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to transition you over here.
Was first elected when I was in 2018, and I was a waitress in New York City. I had no health insurance. I could not pay my rent. And I consistently saw a party.
Now, what's interesting also is talking about that she was a bartender, and Benny Johnson actually went to the area in which she lived, and she lived in a very upscale neighborhood. And so the claims that she's made in the past about that she didn't really have it all when she was growing up seemed to be debunked by Benny Johnson. You can check that video out yourself if you'd like, and just take that with a data point with a grain of salt. You go ahead and figure that one out if you so please. But she makes it sound like she has got a harder life than she actually had it out to be.
Championed special interests, the elite, and a Democratic Party that was very much kind of telling working people that everything was fine when it in fact wasn't. And after I was elected, I remember I was crossing this threshold, and there's this closed door meeting of many high-ranking Democratic Party officials, people that you see in the news and all of that. And they derided behind closed doors at that time, a long time ago. They derided many of the populist demands that I had run my campaign on. And I had defeated a 20-year Democratic incumbent that was part of Democratic Party leadership. And they said $15 minimum wage at that time, way too high, too severe. The idea of tuition-free public colleges and universities, too far, expanding health insurance and Medicare, too extreme. And these were all of the things that I, as a waitress, had campaigned on and had been major pain points in my life. And then they said, we have to listen to working class people more. And I think that that encapsulates much of the betrayal that the working class in the United States had felt. But we have also come a long way since then, and we have a long way to go. The United States right now is experiencing a political pendulum, and depending, really, the party that is seen most as betraying the working class tends to be the governing party in this moment. Right now, that happens to be the Republican majority. But really, what we are seeing over the last 8 years, I think, has been a growing recognition that of those past errors that go back, that include military interventionism in the Iraq War, that include a recognition of NAFTA as a failed policy for many rural and working class communities. And now I think we are moving in this direction of increased recognition that we have to have a working class centered politics if we are going to succeed, and also if we are going to stave off the scourges of authoritarianism, which also provides political sirens, political siren calls to allure people into finding scapegoats to blame.
What is, I mean, does anybody really, are any of us following her sort of grift here? And she's basically talking about the party that she joined only to be a part of that same party, only to be a part of the same party that she opposed, of the sort of the ruling, the governing body that rules over the people in a way that is just, unheard of. Or this was literally Biden just over a year ago, and the amount of support and the amount of the amount of politicians on the Democrat side who came to the defense of Joe Biden despite his decline in his mental health and everything that we saw leading up to that point, and the type of drift, not grift. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The drift that we just sort of witnessed there. And it gets worse because we've seen other clips of her, even, regarding the sort of, and let me pull the clip up for you. And this is her at talking about Maduro, talking about the sort of equator line. Why she brings this up, I mean, gosh, who knows? But she's not making a very articulate point here. And let me get you guys over to the clip here. And this is the clip here. This is the clip. This is what we're looking for.
Was a pure appeal to Western culture. My favorite part was when he said that.
Now she's talking about Marco Rubio. In this clip, she's actually talking about what she doesn't understand when it comes to just history in the first place.
American cowboys came from Spain.
I thought they came from Winnetou, but
I believe the Mexicans and descendants of African enslaved peoples would like to have a word.
And so she got a ton of backlash for this. Yes, the vaunted Aztec cavalry had almost defeated Cortez. You've had even, what's his name? Here's Vaquero. Somebody put this Wikipedia saying the Vaquero, Spanish, Portuguese, European Portuguese, is a horse-mounted livestock herder of a tradition that has its roots in the Iberian Peninsula and extensively developed in what is today Mexico, then New Spain. from the method brought to the Americas from Spain. So again, the way that people are just absolutely going hard on this subject. And she also mentions Venezuela, and she talks about Venezuela being under the equator line. And people have been rightly pointing out that Venezuela is above the equator line. Now, the fact that she doesn't know geography, and being a politician, especially of the position that she's in as a congresswoman, these are basic things that they should know. And what I mentioned just a couple of podcasts ago, broadcasts, live shows, we saw Wesley Hunt actually want to implement a legislation to establish a 28th Amendment requiring every member of Congress to pass a basic civics exam before taking the oath of office. Those entrusted with representing the American people should first demonstrate a clear understanding of the Constitution, our history, and principles that built this nation. Knowledge of our founding ideals is not optional. It is essential, because protecting America's future begins with the honoring its past, and safeguarding the foundations of this republic starts with leaders who truly understand it. And there's this promo that he put together, which I'm not going to play it for copyright reasons, of the music that is behind it, but basically it's a very well, formatted video, putting politicians that speak on certain matters regarding civics and basic civics, and essentially not understanding what they're saying. And it's just bad. It's just bad. And so that's what we've been seeing from AOC. But not only AOC, are we also witnessing Gavin Newsom, who's is very outspoken about his 2028 presidential election, as he's going abroad. He's going to countries and speaking on behalf of being, the largest GDP state here. He goes on and on. But his focus, if elected into office, basically is to reinstitute climate change and these policies that he will hit the ground running hard on his 2030 agenda. California is essentially a testing ground, if you think about it, for what he will do or what he could do in America, which I hope the American people, at least the Democrats, are smart enough not to vote him in and would choose somebody else different. Maybe Kamala Harris they will select as their nominee, and maybe she will run with Josh Shapiro, as people were thinking that she might have him as her running mate. And I want to conduct a poll here for the moment that I have you guys. And this is a poll that I think maybe you guys will want to engage in. Let's play Gavin Newsom here for a moment. This is at the Munich Security Conference also, and this is regarding climate change.
Donald Trump is temporary. He'll be gone in 3 years. California is a stable and reliable partner in this space. And it's important for folks to understand the temporary nature of this current administration in relationship to the issue of climate change and climate policy.
But Governor, many have called Joe Biden the climate president, but that didn't help with his reelection. So how important do you think climate issues will be back for the 2028 presidential election?
Well, you may not believe in science, but you got to believe your own eyes. I mean, people are burning up, choking up, heating up. We have simultaneous droughts and floods. Historic wildfires. You know maybe little about California. You've seen those images of these wildfires. Talk about being as dumb as we want to be. Places, lifestyles, tradition, being wiped off the map. Greenville, Paradise, California. And so this issue has been brought home in a very personal way, not a political way. And Senator Whitehouse is here. He's also someone that deeply understands that climate risk is financial risk. It's becoming uninsurable. This is an economic issue, not just a moral issue. It's not just a competitiveness issue. And so it's incredibly important that we talk in those terms to address some of the political dynamics. But it's, again, something we're on the other side in California. It's a big blue state, but also has more Republicans than most Republican states. And we have long moved beyond the partisanship on this issue because there is no Republican thermometer, there's no Democratic thermometer. There's just reality. And people in my state have been mugged by reality. Those that have been in denial understand that we're on the other side of the debate.
What's fascinating is we have Gavin Newsom, who is essentially saying that Trump's reign will end. He has only 3 years left, and California is at the very top, tippity top, and that essentially he's got, trying to say that he's got a longer, he's got more of a chance of potentially being the president. And it's just striking to me. And the level of comedy with Gavin Newsom, even mentioning the Paradise Fire, Paradise, California fire, but not mentioning the Palisades fire. Talking about, like, as if it's not his problem, as if he didn't know, as if he's talking in a third person, being outside of the state of California, or even somebody who's running for governor in California, as if there's an incompetent governor, as if there's an incompetent governor that he's running against. He is that governor. And you're right, every big company is leaving California, even with the shutdown of what was the gas company that is moving out, I forget, will cause more chokeholds at the gas pump. So it's just fascinating that we have, and how comedic this is, that this was one of the biggest sort of level of incompetency, and with Karen Bass, with Gavin Newsom concerning the Palisades fire, and the fact that he tried to, that were what, how long from these fires, and they started to want to implement buildings, low-income housing buildings. And so even Donald Trump basically said that we're not going to allow it. This is ridiculous. I'm not going to allow it. This is him on that matter.
They want to build a low-income housing project right in the middle of everything in Palisades, and I'm not going to allow it to happen, okay? I mean, maybe it's politically correct, maybe it's not. I'm not going to let these people destroy the value of their houses. I built a lot of low-income housing. I made a lot of money building low-income housing. I know more about it than anybody. We're not going to allow this guy to build a low-income housing project on top of everything else in the middle of that mess that was created by the fact that they didn't allow water to come down from the Pacific Northwest, okay?
So it was an issue that Gavin Newsom, and thank you, A. Matthews, for saying, Valero, yes, they are moving out of California. And not only that, we have so much rain leading up to, and not only that, even after the fact, that is Gavin Newsom even, you say, how's the high-speed train in California coming along? Actually, I found this funny because we know, let me pull this up for you. We know that Gavin Newsom is under intense scrutiny concerning the railway system, and people asking what's happening with that and where is this even going. And so this is, let me show you this post here. Let's see if I can actually find it, if I'm able to find it. Let's see here. Yeah, I thought I had it here. So anyway, basically, the article that was talking about Gavin Newsom and the updates concerning, oh, here we go. This is it. Oh, here we go. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is what we got here. This might be what we're looking for here. All right, stick with me. Thanks, guys. Let me get the audio in and let me bring you into this picture so you can see what we're seeing.
Central Valley and Wasco, right near Shafter, and we just made an announcement of our progress here on the high-speed rail system. We're now in the process of starting to lay track, 119-mile first phase, fully funded because of the investments we'll make through the Cap and Invest program through 2045. 1,700 people every single day, union jobs, go to work on this project. 58 large-scale structures have been complete, 29 others underway, 99% of the environmental work done. All of the hard work behind us, now we're going to see the fruits of that. We're going to start seeing precisely what you see here. Real tracks, real progress.
Real tracks, real progress, and yet there's still nothing. And so what he has to do is he sort of has to at least make it look like he's doing something so that he can look credible, right? It's bad. It's just bad. But Newsom visited Kern County Tuesday to celebrate the completion of a railhead facility, a critical step in the track laying stage. It's just crazy. It's just crazy. And your response to Marissa A. Matthews, you say, true, Newsom refuses to build necessary reservoirs to keep snowmelt due to environmental impacts. And I had a little incident today. I had to go to the store just before going live here. And you guys remember this so-called, the time when was this? Back in 2000, early 2000s, maybe prior to 2010, you had this implementation of the grocery bag sort of, fee, 10-cent fee, in order to sort of make people think twice about buying plastic bags in order to help the environment, that this would save, the environment, that it would stop bags from being, produced, whatever that means that they wanted to do this. Now we know this is lie. And by the way, thank you so much, Pastor Rob Goodman, you sent a wonderful gift. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. What's interesting is that we have this implementation of the bag fee and 10 cents. And now they've shifted them to paper bags. And what we've been seeing online are paper bags are ripping. Not only that, can people not utilize these paper bags for their makeshift trash bags, right? Because we all use them for trash bags. I mean, might as well. We've got the bag. We got plastic straw, the plastic straw ban, exactly, where they began to implement paper straws. They realized how terrible of an idea that was. And so anyway, I'm getting home, I'm trying to open my front door. And what happens? Literally, the entire bag rips in half. Actually, I'm staring right at it. All my groceries fall out. It's literally split in half, sitting on the chair right here because I needed to jump on to go on the live show. I put what needed to go in the fridge. It's not, none of that's, all that's good. All that's fine. Now we got paper bags. What happened to the fact that the plastic bags in the first place were causing harm to the environment? And we still get taxed for paper bags? Or we still get the fee for paper bags? Remove the fee. You're going to give us paper bags, remove the fee. I mean, this is recyclable, right? Anyway. But who wants to bring reusables? I don't want to have to carry around a bunch of reusable bags and look like that. I'm sorry, it's weird. I don't want to go to the grocery store carrying my reusable bags. I mean, I got a stack, in the case that I want to use them. I don't use them. Paper bags, mind you, ever since we transitioned to paper bags, right? Because I always stored the plastic ones to use for my trash cans. Now I'm storing the paper bags. I don't even use them. I don't, it's just weird. Why am I going to do that? Dead Man Lives, you say almost all food comes in plastic bags. It's not even the fact that it's lazy. It's stupid. Bad policies. We know that we're being defrauded based on a simple 10 cents. It's another way to make money. It's another way to make money. And guys, look, by the way, go vote in the poll as we have that ongoing right now. This is the 2028 nominees. You have Vance and Rubio potentially being on a ticket, as Donald Trump was asked during a press. Let me see here. One of the press conversations they had on the airplane, Air Force One, basically talks about if he would endorse these two on a ticket. And he said, I don't have to worry about that right now. Basically, there's 3 more years. And but here's his response also to Gavin Newsom and AOC in Munich. And yeah, no good words to say.
I watched AOC answering questions in Munich. This was not a good look for the United States. I watched Gavin Newsom answering questions in Munich, and this was a bad look for our country. These two people are incompetent. And at least Hillary's competent. She's just Trump deranged. She was so deranged. She is an angry woman. But I watched the other two speaking and answering basic questions. Look, Gavin has destroyed California. And AOC, I never heard her speak very much. And they started answering questions. She had no idea what was happening. She had no idea how to answer, very important questions concerning the world. But she can't answer questions concerning New York City either, because New York City is got some problems. Now that Gaza.
And he's right. She shouldn't open her mouth. And the only time that she ever says anything that somewhat makes sense is when it's all scripted, when it's all written out for her to go before Congress and make her little, social media clip that she needs to get just to give herself the clout. So anyway, despite that, AOC, Gavin Newsom, terrible. But what is this sort of, what are the Democrats to do? What is their focus? What are they attempting to do these midterms? How are they going to shape up their politics in order for them to look like moderates? Take a look.
And it's that they understand, these Democrats, they understand they cannot get elected saying the things that they believe. So now there's a long campaign to get them to say things that they don't believe, but that sound good, in the hopes that they can get elected and then not do any of those things. So you have Obama talking about dealing with the homeless problem. Democrats don't care about dealing with the homeless problem. But you have to say that because people are sick of it. They don't like being accosted by crazy drug addicts on the street. So yeah, we'll pretend to care about that. With Hillary, you have to pretend to care about the borders because that sounds sane. No, they don't care about the borders at all. And then you had Bashir, who's really, I don't even want to say he's a left-wing nut job. He's kind of a nothing. He's the son of a popular former Kentucky politician, and that's the only reason he's in office. But he let the mask slip there, especially with Spanberger, who's a total left-wing nut job, saying, look, we just have to pretend to believe these things and say things that sound nice, and then when we get in office, we don't have to do any of it. It's a total con job.
Yeah. And so Barack Obama, again, on that clip that we're going to play for you concerning this, where he describes exactly what he mentioned in the video, talking about borders, talking about the homeless issue. So this is Barack Obama on this podcast. Again, I think this is really going very viral, this interview here. And I honestly, quite frankly, doesn't make the Democrats look any good. Seriously.
Is that we're a nation of laws, we have borders, and we've got to figure out an immigration policy that is orderly and that is fair and is enforced in a sensible way that is compatible with our values, but may not fully capture the degree to which that kid should have the same chances in life as a U.S. citizen kid. But, we've got to accommodate the reality that the majority of the American people think that there's a difference between somebody who's a U.S. citizen and somebody who's not, and that they want an orderly immigration system. And sometimes I think what happens in the online debate is if somebody suggests, well, we have to have some immigration enforcement, then somebody's going to point at that child and say, so you don't care about that kid.
Yeah.
So you must be a bad person. The same would be true, let's say, here in Los Angeles around the homeless issue. I think morally, ethically speaking, it is an atrocity that in a country this wealthy, we have people just on the streets. And we should have we should insist on policies that recognize their full humanity, people who are houseless, and be able to provide them the help and resources that they need. But we should also recognize that the average person, doesn't want to have to navigate around a tent city in the middle of downtown, and that we're not going to be able to build a working majority and support for the resources that we need to help folks like that, whether it's drug treatment or temporary housing or what have you. We're not going to be able to generate support for it if we simply say, you know what, it's not their fault, and so they should be able to do whatever they want, because that's a losing political strategy.
He said it.
That doesn't mean that we care less about those folks. It means if we really care about them, then we got to try to figure out how do we gain majority support and be practical in terms of what we can get through at this moment in time and build on those victories. That a lot of times is the arguments that are taking place, but they become sort of performative, and people start saying, oh, you're selling out, or conversely, I think sometimes folks at the center say, you're being impractical and dismissing legitimate critiques and concerns. And what we need to be able to do is to maintain both ideas at the same time, which is our long-term goals have to be driven by our values and our core beliefs and our ethics and our morals, and the sense that every person counts. And short-term, we got to win elections.
Right.
So at any cost, we need to win elections by changing our messaging, our strategy. And this is what we've seen done by, again, Abigail Spanberger, and what she did and what she's doing in Virginia with the implementation of how many, the 50 plus taxes that she wants to implement. Not only that, are we seeing the same, as we mentioned earlier, with Zohran Mamdani? Mamdani is just the same. And what people believed they were going to get, I don't know what people thought. I really don't know what people thought they were going to get, but they got what they deserved because that's who they wanted. They wanted to believe the lie rather than the truth, and that's what they got. And so we have the pairings thus far of 100 votes for Vance and Rubio because people are speculating they're going to be on a ticket, and Kamala and Shapiro as last after Joe Biden dropped out of the race, it was speculated that Shapiro would be her pick. Instead, she picked Waltz out of everybody else. And Andy Bashar and AOC seem to be a good pair just because Andy, who would be the president, who would be the vice president, that would be very interesting. I guess we could switch roles, but the implication is that Kamala, Vance, and Andy would be the president, and the vice would be Rubio, Shapiro, or AOC. And so anyway, you say, what's wrong with Mamdani? Mamdani, and talking about the $12 billion in loss, what is it? The $12 billion deficit that they're dealing with, when even Eric Adams mentioned that if there's a specific policy or specific thing that isn't done, they are going to, this $12 billion deficit is going to hit them hard. And we saw Mamdani go before, doing a sort of press conference talking about the $12 billion deficit when he was warned about the $12 billion deficit. The last administration was warned by Eric Adams. And now he's saying we need more money. And now we need to tax the rich more. And now we need to raise property taxes. And he's getting a lot of heat for it. And not only that, is he really pushing out there the Islamic agenda. And we've gone over this again. and again on this broadcast concerning the sort of Islamification of New York. We're also seeing people posting videos, and it's beginning to become a sort of trend of anytime a New Yorker hears the call to prayer, they begin to just sort of post these videos. And so I believe I have one queued up for you here. And this is New York City. So here's another one.
Here is Atlantic. We are hearing Azan. Come here. I think we're taking off the Texas stuff. Yeah.
So again, people are going online. Anyway, so here's this sort of post here. This is the sound of conquest echoing in New York City right now. It's really what it is. The call to prayer is asserting dominance, and that's what it is. But it says the Islamic call to prayer, the adhan, is being amplified louder and more aggressively, starting as early as 5 a.m., invading homes, neighborhoods, and the once proud skyline where thousands were murdered on 9/11 in Islam's name. In the name of Islam, I think they mean to say. It's kind of a little reverse there, and then rather in the name of Allah, right? Allah sounds like anyway. Okay, so that's what's beginning to happen in New York, and so you say, what's with these fake Islamic videos, Islamophobic videos? What's so fake about it? That's what's happening in New York City. It's just what's happening. And so again, when it comes to the Islamification, you have to remember that that America is a Christian nation in the sense that the founders founded this on biblical principles, Judeo-Christian values, and you see this, you see that their inspiration of the scriptures throughout the founding documents, even throughout the original 13 colonies. It's you just have to go and look, because otherwise, if you don't want to look for yourself, then you're going to continue to ignore it. But these are the same equal rights that that are talked about, that are endowed by our Creator. It's not the government that institutes our equal rights. It's God that institutes these equal rights, because God, if government can institute them, then that means the government can take them away. And so that's why it's so clear in the Declaration of Independence. And so you say Christian values, not Judeo. You have to remember that Christianity started with the Jews. And so why we say Judeo-Christian values is because, simply put, the Old and New Testament scriptures, it's all cohesive as one storyline that tells you of a man who's going to redeem humanity. Even look at the first names in the beginning, that it talks about the genealogy leading up to the flood. You have and maybe you've seen this before, maybe you haven't, but the genealogies and sorry, I can't multitask, but the genealogies talking about specific names that point to what God is to do. Okay, so from Adam, Seth, Enosh, Canaan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah, and Shem. The message that is conveyed there is almost like a golden nugget, that if you begin to realize what God is saying, if you know that the Hebrew names actually have meaning to them, you have man. Adam means man. Seth means appointed, right? Enosh means mortal. Canaan means sorrow. Mahalalel means the blessed God. Jared means shall come down. Enoch means teaching. Methuselah means his death shall bring. Lamech means despairing. And Noah means comfort or rest. When you put these names together, the sentence means man appointed mortal sorrow. The blessed God shall come down teaching. His death shall bring despairing comfort and rest. This is literally the gospel within the names, the genealogy list. And this is not reading into it, because God has names tied into every single name in the scriptures. When you see Jacob, when he's named and how he's named is because he's holding onto the heel of Esau, his brother. And thus he is named heel catcher, which means essentially conniver, right? And so all these instances of what we see in the scriptures, what we see in America, the fact that it's Christendom, and how we begin to why we always constantly talk about going back to sort of what the founding fathers knew concerning the great American experiment. The fact that Benjamin Franklin, that we always talk about on this broadcast, saying that this is a republic if you can keep it. When you look at the Article 4, Section 4, that talks about that every state in this union shall be a republican state, right? These are, let me get the quotation right, because I don't want to get this wrong as I'm quoting it to you, but it says the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government, rather, and shall protect each of them against invasion and on application of the legislature or of the executive when the legislature cannot be convened against domestic violence. So, talking about, what we were going over when we saw what is happening in Minnesota. Let me remind you, what is happening in Minnesota is it's now quiet. Tom Homan stepped in, and there's literally no news coming out of Minnesota, almost no news coming out of Minnesota. You notice that? It's because it was a political show. They wanted to show you, hey, look at what's happening in Minnesota. Look at how bad Donald Trump is doing. Look at how bad, how terrible these operations are. And we exposed all of it on this broadcast, as many others did. You say Republicans would deport Jesus, my guy. The problem with that statement that everybody brings out is the fact that he wouldn't come to America. He would be in Jerusalem. He would be in Israel, first of all. And secondly, he would come in legally. So not only that, can you withhold God from going anywhere? God is everywhere. Read David's statement concerning that. Now, this is also AOC at the Munich Security Conference talking about, trying to answer a basic question concerning U.S. and Taiwan and sort of the relations there as to the protection that they would they provide protection, I believe is the statement that is being made there. So let's take a look at this clip.
Would and should the U.S. actually commit U.S. troops to defend Taiwan if China were to move?
I think that this is such a, I think that this is of course a very longstanding policy of the United States. And I think what we are hoping for is that we want to make sure that we never get to that point.
She couldn't really even answer the question. And that was her response. Now, you say here, rich man would sooner come through the eye of the needle than enter the kingdom of heaven. I'm not sure why you're quoting that, but I'm guessing there's a context to it based on the chats. Illegally on a cloud. They wanted worship seekers, though, because part of the migration to overflow this land was based on not having to assume the royal church's worship. You say, why he would go there? Maybe he would go to Siberia. Let's see here. I'm just going through your guys' comments. Republican as in a republic, like Plato's Republic. Do you really think the word in the Constitution meant the political party? No, I'm not talking about a political party. It's the form of government. Did you not understand what I just said? It's the form of government that not a Republican Party. Neither does it say democracy in the Constitution anywhere in the documents. Democracy. Where you do see democracy is in the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx, where he talks about the implementation of democracy, the finalization being democracy from utilizing the proletariat to go against the bourgeoisie, the ruling class. But who did his letters even? Who was attracted to these letters? Because the working class didn't really care about this. It was the bourgeoisie, the ruling class. They were very intrigued by his writings, by his letters, and they took it and they ran with it. And so this is what we see with Kamala Harris, and the famous phrase that she would always use. If somebody can remind me, it's the phrase, "You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?" No, I'm just kidding. It's not that one. It's the other one. It's the one that says,
it's kind of like the bananas and rice.
No, not that one. It's be unburdened by what has been, right? That phrase, that statement is in a sense a Karl Marx statement that she's made about that in her political speeches. And anyway, so AOC, she has been making herself look like a fool. And this comes as, what was shown about a month ago with AOC and her being put up against JD Vance, and that she was sort of leading the polling concerning this. And so this is her sort of, I guess being a little playful with it. I don't know what you would even call it here, but let's take a look at this clip here.
Democratic Socialist Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is feeling loud and proud after a new and very early poll has her slightly ahead of J.D. Vance in a hypothetical 2028 presidential race. Here's what she had to say when asked about it.
Any reaction to, or do you think that you could beat J.D. Vance in a head-to-head race for president, as polling suggests, in 2028?
Listen, these polls, like 3 years out, are, they are what they are. But let the record show, I would stomp him. I would stomp him.
So, again, whether she's being legitimate, maybe she's just being playful, even with her response. I believe on X, if I'm not mistaken, maybe we can pull that up for you here while we're at it, where she talks about that she's not, what she was doing at the Munich Security Conference wasn't to campaign for her 2028 election bid. Now, let's see if we can find that first of all. Yeah, we'll have to look for that. Anyway, otherwise, what we're looking at when it comes to what these 2028 Democratic nominees and who we list off earlier on the pollings, and what these pollings suggest is we have surprisingly Kamala Harris in the lead, which is interesting because she sort of fell off the map after she lost. She fell off the map. She wrote a book and she sort of went on a little press tour regarding this. And what did we see? We saw that, she sort of branded her Kamala headquarters or Kamala HQ to just headquarters, to headquarters 6-7, right? Some weird phrase that the youth is utilizing these days. And then she switched it up. They changed it to headquarters 6-8. I don't know. Anyway, And somehow she's taken the lead. Somehow she's still back in these early polls. Now, what this is looking to shape up to be in 2028, we don't really know. It's still really early, and that's why I'm just curious to know your guys' thoughts concerning the poll that we have in this chat. If you haven't voted already, we've got the 3 sort of top picks that we've been seeing. And of course, if you guys are just joining in the podcast, we've been here for a little moment as we've been going over some of these subjects, please consider subscribing. Email me your thoughts, freedom@equallyyokeshow.com. And look, when it comes to what Gavin Newsom was saying at the Munich Security Conference concerning, climate change and sort of what his focus is on, when you understand it, let's go back here for a moment, because he talks about Donald Trump being temporary. This is a very important clip that we got to go back to concerning what he's saying.
Communicate today. Donald Trump is temporary. He'll be gone in 3 years. California is a stable and reliable partner in this space. And it's important for folks to understand the temporary nature of this current administration in relationship to the issue of climate change and climate policy.
But Governor,
look, the issue of climate change has been one of, and thank you, Dead Man Lives, I appreciate that. It's also pinned in the comments if you want to email me your thoughts concerning what we've been going over on this broadcast. But Gavin Newsom and his focus on climate change and what he's attempted to do, what he's successfully done in California with the policies he's implemented to really put a lot of restrictions and it's not temporary, a lot of restrictions when it comes to buying cars, when it comes to building houses, when it comes to the economic, or the restrictions to, the environmental restrictions. And so what he's setting up for his 2028 elections, we have to understand that taking care of the world, taking care of the globe, our planet, taking care of our home is not a bad thing. But when you look at Romans, the book of Romans more specifically, we're given a stark warning concerning this. The stark warning is that people begin to make it an idol. They begin to worship the creation. So it says here in verse 20, let's go to chapter 1 here, actually, verse 25. We talk about this scripture here. Starting in verse 2, even verse 21, it says, "For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things." Now, if you remember, Gavin Newsom was saying that people were praising him as God. A little bit weird. Therefore, God gave them up in their lusts of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies amongst themselves, because they exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. Now, you have to be remembered also of the scripture that God's example, God's standard for humanity and what they were to do prior to the fall is this. It says in verse 15 in chapter 2, it says, "The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to keep it." Okay, this is what their responsibility was to do. "And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, You may surely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in that day that you eat you shall surely die," talking about the spiritual death. Or even both, the spiritual death, and not only the spiritual death, but the physical death, that you will eventually die one day, that your days will be numbered from that point on. And so, after that point, we see that he forms Eve out of Adam's side, out of his rib. The word, there's no proper English translation for the word rib, but people speculate just means side. And so anyway, that was what the responsibility of humanity is to do, is to till, work, and keep the garden, take care of the earth. Not a bad thing, but when you begin to worship and serve the creature rather than the creator, it becomes a huge, big, fat problem. So we're not about, the only time that we know about global warming and what will eventually happen is when we're also told in the scriptures that the earth will be consumed by fire, not by a flood. So just interesting, maybe a little bit of funny fact to talk about concerning that. And, we have everything in the political landscape and what we're seeing with the midterms coming up. When we see 2028, it's going to come sooner than later. It's going to come quickly. And so what we are called to do as citizens of the nation in which we are in is, as I've said before, Jeremiah 29:7, to seek the welfare of the nation. Now, go read the context of that. This is concerning the Jews here, that God says, seek the welfare of the nation in which you have been sent to exile. Now, we're not sent into exile into America. However, despite that, we are to still apply what the scripture says concerning seeking the welfare of the nation. We've seen Daniel pray on behalf of the nation. We've also seen Timothy in the book of Timothy telling us to pray, to intercede, for the leaders and all those in authority. We also know that God is the one that raises up kings and removes them, changes times and seasons. God is the one that is in control of it all. Despite the evil that we see, God's plan is in full fruition. And what we're going to begin to see and what's shaping up for the Middle East and what's happening there with the Gaza plan, with what's happening in Iran, and all that is shaping up to be very interesting, politically, of course, but prophetically, where we're looking at a moment in time where the scriptures tell us that Israel is going to be at a point where they are living and dwelling in peace and safety. Read Ezekiel 36, 37, 38. More specifically, 38, chapters 9 through 11, I want to say, where it talks about Israel dwelling in peace and security. But there's going to be a leader who goes and attacks them. This is the leader, Gog, from the land of Magog, who gathers a band of a company of an army. We use modern terms here. An army, a company of men, and shield and helmet and buckler, and it tells us that in the scripture that they're going to be there's going to be a hook placed in the jaw of Gog, the leader of Magog, where they will go and they will see Israel and they will seek to take a spoil. So, concerning all that stuff and what we're looking at and the Gaza plan and the leaders that are there, it's all very interesting and what we're going to be seeing on the horizon. And so, look, just the sort of, let me see if there's anything, we're sort of newsworthy that needs to, be shown here. And there's a lot of stuff that we need to go over, stuff that we'll continue to go over. Let's see here. Oh, here. This is actually, this is what I was trying to show you concerning AOC's response at the Munich conference, that it was not for her bid for president. So this is something that she reposted on her social account. It says, everyone needs to take a deep breath and log back in. This is by Grace and Flood. I'm not sure who that is, but it says, to Miss Ocasio-Cortez, the discourse about her visit had missed the more important point about the risks of authoritarianism, an argument that she said had been well received by the Europeans during 2 foreign policy panels, private meetings with German leaders, and in an address in the packed university auditorium in Berlin. She added that she had gone to Munich not because I'm running for president, but not because I've made some kind of decision about a horse race or a candidacy, but because we need to sound the alarm bells that a lot of those folks in nicely pressed suits in that room will not be there much longer if we do not do something about the runaway inequality that is fueling far-right populist movements, referring to the MAGA movement, most likely. So, again, guys, I want to know your thoughts concerning all of this. We're going to end the broadcast here. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the podcast. And for the folks, there was a message that came in earlier saying, that many messages talking about that I'm paid to say this stuff. And the reality is I am paid by the generous supporters on this broadcast who choose to super chat, who choose to become a member of this channel, to grow this channel greater than what it can be. And so we all want to be a part of a movement that is greater than us. And this is something that Charlie Kirk has said, and something that is indeed true, that if God is most certainly moving in a direction, we want to be involved in that. And hopefully, as we continue to seek the Lord on these issues, on everything regarding politics, remember, we're called to live a specific way as Christians, that we're called to live doing the work when the Master returns. And so to conclude the polls here, we have the majority in this chat in particular, that say 66% Vance and Rubio on the ticket, Andy and AOC at 19%, and Kamala Harris and Shapiro at 15%. Interesting pollings there, but I didn't expect anything less than what we see at the top of the list with Vance and Shapiro, Vance and Rubio, which might be likely in the coming years. It's possible. Anything can change. And we may see, as AOC mentioned, a pendulum swing in the political sphere. And so only time will tell, because politics are indeed, it can be a dirty thing. And we know politicians lie. We don't trust politicians. We trust in God and God alone, God Almighty. So I'll see you guys in the next one. If you guys, again, like the show, subscribe to the podcast. That is the best way to support the show. It's free, completely free. And if you want to, you can also, there's memberships available where we want to provide excellent value for you being a member. And we do have a member. There is a member by the name of, let me see here, her name, if I'm not mistaken, is I want to give her a shout out here. And where is it? Robin. She's been a member. So God bless her and God bless her support. And for those that are also here, they want to support, feel free to like the show. And we'll be back. And just to give you that extra push, look, again, this is one of the more professional broadcasted shorts videos that you'll see. If you scroll down, you'll probably see a video that is a bunch of nothing. And not really, it's just playing videos of Trump and playing videos of, whatever. So anyway, despite that, email me your thoughts, your final thoughts, freedom@equallyyokeshow.com. Deadman Liz, thank you so much for your wonderful moderation. The Salt was also in here earlier. Thank you so much. You say, darn, I'm late. I hope you're doing good, brother. Thank you so much for joining me. You are late, but of course you can always catch the broadcast. Marissa, thank you. You say amen. God bless you for being in this broadcast. And you all in America has the best president ever. This is from Swift is him. Where are you from, Swift? Amen. Yeah, you're right. And so far we have a decent president. I'll say I'll say that much. He's doing pretty good, and hopefully we'll see a lot more coming out of the administration to continue to make America great, as we see of what's happening. So let's see if I'm missing any comments here. If Democrats want a female president, put forward a strong female candidate with actual common sense that actually has a brain. Yeah. And if they do indeed put a Democrat president there, a female one at best, yeah, she's going to have to be really well spoken. Otherwise, it's just going to, I don't know. they're just going to vote for the man. So. Looking through your comments here, guys. Thank you so much. A. Matthews, you say awesome job, Charles. Love your work. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. When I vote for common sense. I vote for American freedom. I don't vote for communism, socialism, or Marxism. Amen to your earlier statement there. It's really what we should be going for. Common sense, somewhat, I guess, strong policies. We want strong policies, obviously. Good politics. And we want America to be prosperous. We want the nation to be prosperous. And so in order to seek the peace of the nation, seek the welfare of the nation, we're to live peaceably amongst all, as we're told in the scriptures. So, destroy democracy, economy, the standards of living, but he is great. Who's third in line in the Oval Office? Third in line would be Speaker of the House, I believe. No, you vote for fascism right now. You say billionaire foot soldier. All the same oppression. Let's see here. Yeah, so all this stuff that we need to keep updated on, the Epstein files, everything that is coming out. People are beginning to say, a lot of people are beginning to say is Speaker of the House is Mike Johnson. That's what I said. Speaker of the House. You say, what Bible am I reading? The version is ESV, English Standard Version, which is good to be read aloud. Other versions that are good. I mean, King James Version is fine, but it's just old Elizabeth and King James sort of old English speak. That's decent, somewhat good. I like the words that is utilized. New King James is obviously a good one. And NASB is pretty good. If that was your question, you say, what Bible are you reading? Yeah, it's Logos software. So maybe you should get Logos to partner with us. And maybe they'll offer something for our viewers who want to, get in on this wonderful software. It's really cool. It's handy. Let me just show you a couple things here. And this is not a sponsorship, but basically you go into any specific word here. You can right click a word, show more information. You can look at the exact word here that is utilized. And basically you can see the Hebrew word or the Greek word if it's the New Testament. The meaning to die, dying. And you can look even further at a sort of word study concerning this specific word and where it's utilized in the scriptures. You see the different references. It's this specific mute. I think it's how it's pronounced. Right, 1,008 times throughout Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy, and then you have other words also. And so there's just so much more concerning this specific word, and you can look at all the different sort of references, which you probably can't see much of. Yeah, so when you click on any individual one of these sort of tabs here, it shows the words that are being utilized in the center here. And it shows you all the different references in the scripts. It's so great. Such a great tool to utilize. Somebody's asking, what am I doing? I'm just showing you Logos, the Bible software. If you guys want to get it, it's free. You can sign up for a free thing. It's completely free. But have you seen hundreds of pastors protesting in Minnesota? Maybe talk to them. I haven't seen hundreds of protesters protesting in Minnesota. I actually haven't seen anything of the sort. I've seen hundreds of Buddhists. Oh no, I'm sorry, they didn't go to. Did they go to Minnesota? No, I don't think they went to Minnesota. I think they just arrived in D.C. from Texas. They walked all the way. I think they walked all the way. Is that right? Did they actually walk? Did anybody witness these guys walking? Did they just fly in and sort of, or bus in somewhere just to an unknown location, just said they walked? Do you think they really walked? There's a conspiracy there. You say mixing religion and politics, but you have me muted. So how do you know what I'm saying? What does Habakkuk 2 mean? What specifically from Habakkuk chapter 2? I mean, yeah, chapter 2. What exactly is it that you're looking to know about Habakkuk? Write the vision and make it plain on tables, and that he may run that read. Oh, this isn't. Let me just read it more English. I will stand at my watchpost and station myself on the tower and look out to see what he will say to me and what I will answer concerning my complaint. And the Lord answered me, write the vision, make it plain on tablets, rather, so he may run who reads it. For still the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end. It will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It shall surely come. Talking about the vision at the appointed time. What this vision is concerning, the vision is concerning Daniel, possibly. Where we see Daniel 10:14. Now I come to make thee understand what shall befall thy people in the latter days, for yet my vision is for many days. Ezekiel 7:5-7. Thus says the Lord God, and evil and only evil, behold, is come, the end is come, and the end is come. It watches for you. Behold, it is come, the morning is come unto thee. Thou, O thou that dwellest in the land, the time is come, the day of trouble is near, and not the sounding again of the mountains. Possibly the references to what is being referenced here. Wait for it. It shall surely come. It shall not delay. We also see references to Zephaniah and Isaiah. Therefore wait upon the Lord, saith the Lord, until the day that I rise up to the prey, for my determination is to gather the nations, that I may assemble the kingdoms to pour upon them mine indignation, even all my fierce anger. For all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy. Possibly referring to the end of days. Here, as we see this point being hammered in, behold, his soul is puffed up, it is not upright within him, and but righteous shall live by his faith. Moreover, wine is a traitor, an arrogant man who is never at rest. His greed is as wide as Sheol. Like death, he has never enough. He gathers for himself all nations and collects as his own all peoples. Shall not all these take up their taunt against him? Let me see if you responded as to what, talking about Habakkuk 2:12. Woe to him who builds a town with blood and founds a city on iniquity. Shall not all these take up a taunt against him with scoffing and riddles for him to say? Woe to him who heaps up what is not his own. For how long? And loads himself with pledges. Will not your debtors suddenly arise, and those awake? So these are sort of sayings. It says, shall not all these take up their taunt against him? Provoking action, right? With scoffing and riddles for him to say. Ambiguous sayings, right? And these are the ambiguous sayings that God then lays out here. Behold, it is not from the Lord of hosts, that peoples labor merely for fire, and nations weary themselves for nothing. for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover up the seas. Probably talking about these sayings that people say, and that people are sharing amongst their communities. Woe to him who builds a town with blood. I'm not sure. Behold, it is not from the Lord of hosts that people's labor merely for fire. A lot of this stuff is, you have to read in context. So I'm skipping a little bit, and we're missing context, but for the earth will be filled with knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Woe to him who makes his neighbors drink. You pour out your wrath and make them drunk in order to gaze at their nakedness. You will have your fill of shame instead of glory. Drink yourself and show your uncircumcision. The cup is the Lord's right hand will come around to you, and utter shame will come upon your glory. The violence done to Lebanon will overwhelm you, and will the destruction of the beasts that terrified them, for the blood of man and violence to the earth, to cities and all who dwell in them. Again, the context sort of is being laid out here, talking about the last days, that you're to gear up, you're to be ready for the time of the Lord's indignation, referring to the nations. So interesting there. But you say, I'm already starting, bro. I'm sorry. It's already starting. Should try the Quran. It would be great toilet paper. Wow. That is crazy. He's talking about white folks. Look, the Quran is not a good book. Not good scripture. It won't edify a person's being. It'll only destroy you. So the end of days is nearing. Your pledge to God is to God, not a country. You're right. Absolutely right. Always. All right, guys. I'll see you guys in the next one. If you guys have any further comments, questions, email me your thoughts. freedomequallyyokeshow.com. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
the Secretary of State of the United States.
Good morning. Welcome to Washington. We're glad you're here. This is very important ministerial on a topic that I think we've been talking about quite a bit over the last year and a half, of great importance to all of our nations, and we're very honored that all of you would join us here today. We have a great agenda and a lot of work ahead. This is an issue of incredible importance to this administration, and it's one of the top priorities of this administration. And I think it's a top priority for the world, and that is how to diversify our supply chains, how to diversify our access to critical minerals, to ensure that they are secure and safe. And we'll have more to say about that later on today. But we wanted to begin today by demonstrating to you the high level of engagement and interest on the part of this administration on this topic by hearing from the Vice President, who himself has taken a personal role in being a leader on this front. And so with no further ado, I'd like to introduce my good friend and a very excellent person who's doing an incredible job in the role he's playing in this administration, the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you all for being here. We're honored by the presence of so many world leaders, and it speaks to the importance of what Secretary Rubio and the team are working on to fix this critical minerals issue. And I just wanted to let you know that we're honored by your presence and certainly grateful for you coming to Washington for this very important conversation. I know there are a lot of very important discussions to be had over the rest of the day, and so I want to be relatively brief. First, let me say thanks to our incredible Secretary of State for putting this group together. Marco's doing an incredible job. And when he asked me to come and speak today, I said, man, this is your building. Why don't you come and give a speech? And he said, well, because I've got 5 jobs and you've only got 1. And so I figured I might as well do Marco a solid, since he's also the archivist and the official White House florist and has a number of other jobs in addition to Secretary of State. So I'd kick us off, and then he's going to take the reins from here. But let me just say a few things about what we're doing and why this matters. So I remember after our very wildly successful military operation in Venezuela, the President of the United States was talking with me and Marco and some of the other senior members of the cabinet. And he was talking just about how important it was that we ensured that the global economy had access to oil and gas many years in the future. And that, of course, is one of the reasons why we're interested in Venezuela, is because it has such a critical importance in this all-important resource called oil. And as much as we talk about the modern economy, the digital economy, the high-tech economy, the president said something that was very, very important, and I think should inform a lot of how we think about future growth, which is that as much as data centers and technology and all of these incredible things that we're all working on matter, fundamentally, you still have an economy that runs on real things. And there is no realer thing than oil. And I would add to that, there's no realer thing than critical minerals. And I think a lot of us have learned the hard way, in some ways, over the last year, how much our economies depend on these critical minerals. So every man and woman, I believe, in this room understands what we're confronting together today. And I say together, and that is very much something that is at the heart of Secretary Rubio's initiative, and as he said, at the heart of what we're trying to do all across the administration, is recognize that this is something where our alliances and our friendships can really help one another. We're all on the same team. We're all rowing in the same direction. I believe that in this room, we have close to 2/3 of the world's GDP represented, and so we have the capacity to make ourselves more independent, more self-reliant, and that's what we should be doing. Now, we know that today, the international market for critical minerals is failing. It's failing to create domestic markets or dignified jobs for our labor forces, and it's failing to keep our nation safe. Supply chains remain brittle and exceptionally concentrated. Asset and commodity prices are persistently depressed, driven downward by forces beyond any individual country's control. Now, how many times cumulatively have one of us or many of us in this room heard some variation of the story that I'm about to tell? A lithium mine, a gallium recovery center, you name it, is announced, sometimes with years in planning and financing nearly in place. Then overnight, foreign supply floods the market, the prices collapse, and investors pull out. The project stalls, and eventually the project dies on the vine. We've all seen it firsthand in all of our countries. And the result is a global market where consistent investment is nearly impossible, and it will stay that way so long as prices are erratic and unpredictable. And that's one of the things that we want to work on with this initiative. Let's make the prices more predictable and less erratic so that we can support the domestic supply chains and the investment that makes those supply chains possible. Now, across Europe, North America, there are dozens of mining and processing initiatives that have been suspended or completely abandoned because sustained price weakness makes financing impossible. Time after time, advanced economies with deep capital markets are finding that projects cannot clear costs. The same story plays out elsewhere around the world. In resource-rich developing economies, only a tiny fraction of global mining investment, including from nations, many of them in this room, is reaching the point of actual projects. We plan, we think about it, we even invest a little bit of money, we do the regulatory work, but so many of them die on the vine. Now, everyone knows that these deposits exist. We've mapped a whole lot of them, and we know they're ready to be mined and processed. But capital can't reach them so long as investors lack confidence that those markets are going to remain stable for long enough to justify the long-term commitment. That is the problem that we confront. And even here in the United States, even with all the incredible things that President Trump and the entire administration has done to eliminate permits, to open up the regulatory environment, we have private financing that we've secured, but even in some cases, even in the United States, some of these projects are struggling to attract investors. We see telltale signs of a market distorted beyond recognition, one that punishes strategic investment, one that punishes diversification, and one that punishes long-term planning. This is crazy. We should have the kind of global markets, the kind of domestic markets that reward long-term planning, that reward strategic thinking, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. Now, I think every single one of us represented in this room has become dependent on arrangements we did not choose, and right now, arrangements that we cannot control. We all face the same vulnerability: access to the things that protect our people and sustain our way of life. Everything from missile defense systems to energy infrastructure, to advanced manufacturing, to emerging technologies. The fundamental supply chains that support these industries sometimes can vanish in the blink of an eye without any control or influence from many of the countries in this room. And we in the Trump administration believe it is the business of the government, of the people's government elected just over a year ago, to confront such problems, and that we want to confront them together. And I think that you're all here, at least I hope you're all here, because you all feel the exact same way. Now, our administration came into office last January, barely a year ago, with a clear mandate to reindustrialize the United States of America and return American workers to the center of our economic policy. And that is what we are doing. And I want to tell you just a little story about one of the very first meetings I had with our Secretary of Commerce and the Secretary of the Treasury, two great people, two great business leaders. And I remember saying, look, we have our views of the Biden administration. We're not particularly fans, as you may have guessed. But setting that to the side, surely the Biden administration put together a list of the critical industries, the critical technologies, the critical manufacturing facilities that are supported by these rare earth minerals, these critical minerals. We may think it's bad work. We may think the people who put it together weren't particularly wise, but surely that gives us some foundation to build on. And I was shocked when our Secretary of the Commerce and Secretary of the Treasury came back to me and said, actually, we have never done this. For the last 4 years, the Biden administration never sat down and tried to understand what are the critical deficiencies in world supply chains. That's crazy. It's insane that we ever got to this point, but In just 1 year, the President of the United States has struck dozens of deals to fix that problem. Domestic and foreign producers are both included in this, and we're trying to ensure durable, end-to-end supply chains for our country, but also for many of our friends. We've mobilized public financing tools at an unprecedented scale, providing up to $100 billion in lending authority for critical minerals to the Office of Strategic Capital. Marco's now a venture capitalist too. He's got many jobs. We've overturned old orthodoxies and taken direct stakes in high-value mining and processing companies. The United States had not built a primary smelter in this country since 1980, before I was born, 4 years before I was born. In the last month alone, we have announced 2, one of which is already fully funded. And on Monday, the Trump administration announced Project Vault, America's first ever domestic critical minerals stockpile. With these moves, we intend to build an ironclad network of new industrial supply chains to span the entire nation. We're going to create good-paying jobs, skilled jobs for the American labor force, and those people, those great workers, are going to be securing a new era of prosperity for American families, and I believe for many people all over the world. But we seek to make sure our friends and our allies are part of this and that you all are covered as well. Our goal here, and the reason why we're doing this conference, is to align trade policy, development finance, and diplomatic engagement towards a shared strategic objective. And that objective is very simple: diversifying global supply in the critical minerals market while strengthening the partner countries who help all of us in this shared effort. Over the past year, our administration has signed agreements, we have launched many joint initiatives, and we have committed extensive resources with many of you in this room, with many governments, and our work extends across disparate regions and all stages of the value chain. We've convened this ministerial in an effort to accelerate that shared work. So this morning, the Trump administration is proposing a concrete mechanism to return the global critical minerals market to a healthier, more competitive state. A preferential trade zone for critical minerals protected from external disruptions through enforceable price floors. We will establish reference prices for critical minerals at each stage of production, pricing that reflects real-world fair market value. And for members of the preferential zone, these reference prices will operate as a floor, maintained through adjustable tariffs to uphold pricing integrity. We want to eliminate that problem of people flooding into our markets with cheap critical minerals to undercut our domestic manufacturers, because we know, of course, that as soon as they've undercut our domestic makers, the domestic markers, they leave the market, and the people who undercut them then jack up the price to a completely unfair level. We're going to fix that problem. Together, we want members to form a trading bloc among allies and partners, one that guarantees American access to American industrial might while also expanding production across the entire zone. The benefits will be immediate and durable. Regardless of how much material flows into the global market, prices within the preferential trade zone will remain consistent. Over time, our goal within that zone is to create diverse centers of production, stable investment conditions, and supply chains that are immune to the kind of external disruptions that we've already talked about. For those of you who join, we offer you a necessary foundation for private financing and secure access to the critical mineral supplies your nation would require in an emergency or some other contingency. By regulating imports to preserve free and fair competition within the preferential trading zone, we will elevate our nation's miners and refiners, our investors and our producers alike. We are all on the same team, and we need to create the economic incentives that reward people for investing and building in our countries. Membership will be vital for developing economies seeking to expand mining capacity. And it'll be just as important for the advanced economies that rely on these materials to sustain their advanced industries, to sustain their growth and security. And I want to be clear with every person in this room. While we believe America's market is large enough to create its own critical minerals trading zone, this entire effort will be stronger and far more competitive if we build it together. So I'm pleased that so many of you here today have already signed on to this plan. Some of you have not. And for those not yet there, we hope that today's discussions will encourage you to finalize those agreements as quickly as possible. Now, I know you're going to be hearing from a lot of others in our administration, including our great Secretary of Rubio, I think really the greatest Secretary of State the United States has ever had, and other senior administrators in our team. And I know that Ambassador Greer, our great trade representative, will present further specifics about what he'll be negotiating, what we're calling the Agreement on Trade and Critical Minerals. Knowing Jameson, I know it will be a very productive session, and I know it will be a very detailed session. As all of you who know Jameson well, he is a guy who gets into the details because he knows that that's where the substance of an agreement can really be made. So I want to close, but before I do, let me just reiterate. We here, I think all of us, are friends. We've all spent many years describing this problem. Before I was ever in politics, I would hear politicians and global leaders talk about this problem. For too many of those years, we talked about it, but we refused to actually solve it. The framework before us is a change. It is a practical and enforceable approach to solving the problem, not just complaining about it. Many of you have helped us design it, and we're, of course, constructing it together in real time. So to those of you still on the fence, I say, let's move together. Before you is a chance to lead, to secure your nation's ability to build, to produce, to defend itself. What is before all of us is an opportunity at self-reliance, that we never have to rely on anybody else except for each other for the critical minerals necessary to sustain our industries and to sustain growth. So I propose that we come together and we shape a market worthy of the great men and women of our countries who depend on that market. Again, I want to thank you all for being here. I'm honored by your presence. The President sends his very best regards, and I look forward to everything that we're going to accomplish together. God bless you all and have fun today.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. As you saw, I have to put my own sign here, too, so it's another job I have. I'm in charge of the signage. No, thank you all for joining us. I can tell you how honored we truly are that all of you would make the trip to be a part of this on such an important topic. And I want to thank the Vice President for coming this morning. I thought it was important you hear from him because it's a priority for this administration at the highest order, as it is, I know, a priority for many of our partners. And our hope is to use both this forum and our position here today to serve as a convener on what really is an international problem, an international situation or an international issue that needs multilateral international solutions. I don't need to explain to anybody here that critical minerals are vital to the devices that we use every single day. They power our infrastructure, our industry, and our national defense, which is something that's not talked about enough, but it's a key part of that. And so our goal is to have a global market that's secure, a global supply that's enduring and is available to everyone, every nation at an affordable price. That's a top priority for this administration. I want to talk briefly about our politics here domestically, or our policies here domestically, primarily to serve as an example or a reminder of what a priority we give this topic. President Trump, from day one in office, has made clear that economic security is national security. So we, for example, following in March, he issued an executive order to accelerate permitting reform,
to increase domestic mining, and to build reliable supply chains, both at home and abroad. And we feel like all of you, our friends and our partners, stand to benefit from the secure supply chains that we want to be a big part of building. In October alone, the United States secured over $10 billion in critical mineral agreements across 5 countries. Our friends and partners stand to, in December, for example, we convened stakeholders from around the world at the Pax Silica Summit. And thank you, Jacob, for doing that. It's launching a partnership dedicated to building a resilient silicone supply chain capable of powering a new era of global prosperity. Pax Silica and artificial intelligence may be the future. Still, the future will never come to pass. None of these things are going to be possible unless we rebuild the factories and reopen the mines upon which these technologies depend. And I want to use a case in point from our own history to highlight this. The United States used to produce its own critical minerals and derivative products like rare earth magnets. Back in 1949, miners in Mountain Pass, California, discovered one of the world's richest mineral deposits. By 1952, the United States, we were mining rare earths there, and that discovery sparked a revolution. American scientists and engineers, alongside innovators from many of the countries that are here today, rushed to discover new applications for these minerals. And with these new technologies, ushered in the jet age. We ushered in the space age. We ushered in the computer age. And then we became blinded by the potential of the technologies those metals enabled, but we neglected their importance. Mining is less glamorous than building computers. It's less glamorous than building cars or airplanes. But building computers and cars and airplanes is less glamorous than designing them. As we embraced what was new and glamorous, we outsourced what seemed old and unfashionable. We allowed, for example, Mountain Pass, and with it most of America's critical mineral industry, to wither and to die so that we could focus on manufacturing. Then we outsourced the manufacturing. And I know this is a story I'm telling, but it's a story many of the advanced economies represented here today understand well. We outsourced the manufacturing so we could focus on designing these goods. And then one day we woke up and we realized we had outsourced our economic security and our very future. We were at the mercy of whoever controlled supply chains for these minerals. So my hope is that we are gathered here today as the first but important step to rectifying this mistake, to bring together our collective talent for innovation where our advantage over rivals has only grown, and to apply it to bringing back manufacturing and reopening mines here in the United States, but also in all of the partner nations represented here today. I think it's interesting that about 50 years ago, actually in this very room, ministers from around the world joined then Secretary of State Henry Kissinger for the Washington Energy Conference. That meeting took place during a moment where global energy supplies were concentrated, where markets were distorted, and access to a single critical resource, at that time, of course, being oil, had become a tool of political pressure. That is the world 50 years ago. That meeting led directly to the creation of the International Energy Agency to coordinate among like-minded partners and secure access to energy commodities. And so today, we return 50 years later in the hopes of advancing a bilateral critical minerals framework agreement to the same end on that front. These frameworks are designed to create alternative sources of supply and to protect every single stage of production, from mining to refining and processing to manufacturing. All of these things, protecting them from non-market disruption. They will provide platforms for coordinating policies that ensure all of our citizens can enjoy abundant and affordable access to these critical minerals. And so we stand ready and intend to work with each country here today to find a specialized role that you can play. If you don't have minerals, you can help refine them. And if the countries gathered here include the largest consumers of critical mineral products, who together have the buying power, collectively, have the buying power to build a more resilient and diverse global market. Everyone here has a role to play, and that's why we're so grateful for you coming and being a part of this gathering that I hope will lead to not just more gatherings, but action. The United States stands ready alongside each of you as we enter this new age of shared prosperity and security. And I want to end by saying that while we intend to play a key role and an important role, and to use the size
and influence of our markets to drive this. This is an international, multilateral effort, and it only works. You can only have diversity and choice in these markets if it is broadly adopted across multiple countries. So this initiative here today may be one that started with us, but this is not solely an American initiative. This must be an international, global initiative with like-minded countries who all have one thing in common. We want to see a diverse supply of critical minerals and a secure and resilient supply chains across the world so all of our economies can prosper without ever having these things be susceptible, at worst case scenario, being used as leverage against us, or any other disruption that could come to the market that would undermine our collective economic security. So thank you all for being a part of this today. We appreciate it very much. Let me now turn, as we'll begin our program here. I think I'm gonna, Minister Hori, I think you're going to start off. So thank you very much for being here today. Thank you all for being a part of this today.
Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary, Your Excellencies and distinguished guests, I am Yuel Hori, State Minister for Foreign Affairs of Japan. It is my great honor to address you on behalf of the government of Japan regarding one of the most pressing and crucial issues we collectively face today, critical mineral supply chains. May I begin with thanking our host. I'd like to express my sincere appreciation for the decisive leadership of the United States in convening today's critical minerals ministerial meeting. I first would like to echo the remarks by Vice President Vance and Secretary Rubio. Japan shares a deep sense of concern and urgency about the risk of disruptions to critical mineral supply chains. Sitting at the very upstream end of supply chains and being used across a wide range of industries, critical minerals and its stable supply is indispensable to the sustainable development of the global economy. That is precisely why Japan, under Prime Minister Takaichi's leadership, has redoubled its efforts to diversify sources of supply for critical minerals. Recently, Japan designated critical minerals as one of the priority areas under the new initiative of promoting bold strategic investment to enhance Japan's resilience and achieve robust economic growth. Amid rising geopolitical risks, Japan will accelerate efforts to secure upstream sources. At the same time, we will take flexible measures downstream, such as diversifying procurement sources in cooperation with like-minded partners who are here today. In fact, in recent years, we have already witnessed first-hand supply chain disruptions. Even in recent months, this challenge has become further deteriorated. Against such backdrop, we have come to understand that we are in the same boat, as any supply chain disruption would bring significant impact on the global economy. We should work together to address this challenge. To prevent such supply chain disruptions, the key is to diversify supply sources, including the refining and processing of geographically concentrated critical minerals. To do so, it requires a collective action. We must seize this opportunity to advance cooperation among like-minded countries, partners like us. With that in mind, I'm looking forward to the launch of FORGE, the Forum on Resource Geostrategic Engagement. In the next session, Japan strongly believes that FORGE will become an important venue and a vehicle for us to focus on supply chain diversification and ensure policy coordination. Japan stands ready to actively contribute to discussions to further deepen collaboration with partners and to ensure the effective implementation of this initiative. So, how we should move forward from here? On the supply side, diversification is essential. Diversity, as opposed to concentration, is what makes us resilient. This has to be one of our major guiding principles. In this context, I'd like to take a moment to briefly talk about Japan's efforts to date. Japan has been pursuing various projects in cooperation with the United States as well as with stakeholders across the globe in this regard. Diversification of supply sources and enhancement of supply chain resilience has been Japan's top priority for many years, and we have taken policy measures accordingly. Back in 2022, Japan enacted the first ever Economic Security Promotion Act and created new programs with a focus on critical minerals. Just as importantly, Japan has been implementing public-private support measures, including expanding JOGMEC's investment framework, increasing allowable investment ratios, and allocating a total budget of $3.5 billion US. Around this table, there are many partners with enormous potential for the production and refining of rare earth elements as well as other significant critical mineral sources. Angola, Argentina, Australia, Bolivia, Brazil, Canada, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, France. Well, the list goes on and on. Japan is determined to seek robust partnership with you all. As geopolitical risks continue to rise, we will redouble our efforts to secure alternative supply sources and to build more resilient, reliable, and secure global supply chains. Diversity only comes from a collective action. No single country can overcome fragility of critical mineral supply and over-dependence on specific countries on its own. With the launch of FORGE, now it is time for action. On the demand side, it is imperative that we avoid the situation in which critical minerals and their derivatives produced through non-market-based policies or practices crowd out products with distorted price competitiveness and unfairly monopolize the global market. Japan will engage in discussions with like-minded countries, including the United States, the European Union, and others present here in a positive and constructive manner, and will work to build an effective mechanism with industrial engagement. In this regard, Japan highly appreciates the U.S. for its decisive leadership. Distinguished colleagues, as we gather today, we are clear-eyed about what our mission is and what our challenges are. Together, we can build on our advantages and make our critical mineral supply chains more resilient. Japan has an unwavering determination to work with you as your trusted partner on every aspect: demand and supply, mining and refining, upstream and downstream. Japan is ready to enhance coordination and collaboration with you all. Together, let's make a meaningful difference. In closing, I thank you for your kind attention. I very much look forward to the discussion today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister Hori. It's a privilege to introduce David Copley, Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director for Global Supply Chains at the National Security Council. We're currently serving in the most historic administration in over a century, one that recognizes that a supply chain responsive to national security realities is a prerequisite to long-term economic growth. The decisions we make today about who we partner with are multi-decade decisions. We believe our partners will capture economic growth and value at all layers of the supply chain stack. The AI revolution we're living through is leading to record historic demand for everything, from copper to cobalt, nickel, zinc, aluminum, silicon, and virtually every element on the periodic table. We're also seeing surging demand for products downstream of the supply chain, including manufactured products like smartphone, chips, telecom infrastructure, industrial robots, machinery, and much more. My friends, the pie is rapidly expanding, and the United States accounts for 30% of global consumption. So we're taking steps to narrow the gap between what we produce and what we consume. But in order to merely keep a pace with global demand, in the US and abroad, we need to surge production capacity at home as well as in partner countries. David sits at the very center of this mission. His work is foundational to the strategic resilience of our country. He is tasked with the monumental challenge of de-risking our critical mineral dependencies, ensuring that the United States and our allies remain unassailable in the face of systemic competition. David brings a level of rigor and foresight that is essential for our department's mission and for the country at large. Please join me in welcoming David Copley.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Jacob, for that. And thank you all for being here today. Thank you to the Vice President for his remarks and for his leadership. Thank you, Secretary Rubio, for hosting. And thank you to President Trump for his visionary and forward-leaning leadership on the critical minerals issue. The President understands the need to secure the foundational elements of the modern economy, and he has prioritized this issue as a matter of national security and economic prosperity. I'm going to speak with you all today to provide an overview about what we're doing in the United States to fix the critical minerals problem. We know this is an issue that will require a global solution and teamwork. Of the 57 minerals on our critical minerals list, over a dozen aren't even mined in the United States. So this is truly a global challenge. In the United States, for a number of decades, we've neglected our mining sector and frankly been happy to outsource mining activities to others around the world. We've had some of the worst mine development timelines in the world in the United States. 29 years to build an average mine, because our permitting framework and our litigation framework have been so onerous. Mining in the United States has been perceived as a dirty old world industry, so we haven't had enough young people choosing mining as a career. And we only graduate something like 200 to 250 mining engineers annually. Not good for a country of 340 million people facing a critical problem. But I'm proud to say that under President Trump's leadership, we in the United States have done a complete 180 and again made mining a priority industry for our national development. Because as all of you hopefully understand, minerals are the elemental building blocks of everything we need for our manufacturing sector as we reindustrialize our country. So what are we doing in the United States to fix the problem? Broadly, 4 key initiatives. We're investing in mining projects, we're stockpiling minerals, we're going to protect our mining companies, and we're rebuilding our mining ecosystem. To start, we're investing heavily in mining-specific projects, like recent deals with MP Materials, Lithium Americas, Korea Zinc, Ma'aden, and many, many others. I believe over the next few years, the United States government, between debt and equity, will deploy hundreds of billions of capital into the mining sector to get projects going. We are quite frankly doing things the American government has never done before, like equity investing, so we can get deals to pencil quickly and move forward. We've created public-private minerals investment funds, like our Critical Minerals Consortium with Orion Resources and another partnership with TechMet. Investments is an area of great potential for collaboration with your governments as we look to jointly develop mining projects with partners around the world. Second, we've begun stockpiling minerals. President Trump and Vice President Vance convinced Congress to give us $2 billion over the summer to stockpile minerals in our national defense stockpile. That's the largest investment we've made in our defense stockpile since the Cold War ended. And just 2 days ago, the President announced Project Vault, the creation of a national strategic critical minerals reserve, a $12 billion vehicle under our Export-Import Bank. This is the first time in the history of the United States we've ever stockpiled minerals for our civilian economy, to protect our commercial industry and insulate them from the painful effects of supply shocks. Third, we're going to protect our mining companies. We know the mining industry has a problem with commodity pricing caused by strategic dumping and overproduction. Returns in the mining sector, quite frankly, have not been good enough over the last 30 years, at least partially due to this problem. This is a key part of what we want to talk to you all about today. The current state of affairs, in which commodity prices are kept low for geostrategic reasons through overproduction, is damaging to minerals-producing nations by reducing the value of your assets and your tax receipts. And it's equally damaging to consuming nations by harming your national and economic security. The current system doesn't make sense for any of us, but with coordinated global action, as described by the Vice President, we can fix this problem in a way that will be better for both producers and consumers of minerals. And lastly, we are fixing our mining ecosystem in the United States. I mentioned earlier in my remarks that S&P reported 29-year timelines to develop an average mine in the United States. This is completely unacceptable to President Trump and Vice President Vance. And will not
We gather here today as members of a historic alliance, an alliance that saved and changed the world. You know, when this conference began in 1963, it was in a nation, actually it was on a continent, that was divided against itself. The line between communism and freedom ran through the heart of Germany. The first barbed fences of the Berlin Wall had gone up just 2 years prior. And just months before that first conference, before our predecessors first met here in Munich, the Cuban Missile Crisis had brought the world to the brink of nuclear destruction. Even as World War II still burned fresh in the memory of Americans and Europeans alike, we found ourselves staring down the barrel of a new global catastrophe. One with the potential for a new kind of destruction, more apocalyptic and final than anything before in the history of mankind. The time of that first gathering, Soviet communism was on the march. Thousands of years of Western civilization hung in the balance. At that time, victory was far from certain. But we were driven by a common purpose. We were unified not just by what we were fighting against. We were unified by what we were fighting for. And together, Europe and America prevailed. And a continent was rebuilt. Our people prospered. In time, the East and West blocks were reunited. A civilization was once again made whole. That infamous wall that had cleaved this nation into two came down, and with it, an evil empire. And the East and West became one again. But the euphoria of this triumph led us to a dangerous delusion that we had entered, quote, the end of history, that every nation would now be a liberal democracy, that the ties formed by trade and by commerce alone would now replace nationhood, that the rules-based global order, an overused term, would now replace the national interest, and that we would now live in a world without borders where everyone became a citizen of the world. This was a foolish idea that ignored both human nature and it ignored the lessons of over 5,000 years of recorded human history. And it has cost us dearly. In this delusion, we embraced a dogmatic vision of free and unfettered trade, even as some nations protected their economies and subsidized their companies to systematically undercut ours, shuttering our plants, resulting in large parts of our societies being deindustrialized, shipping millions of working and middle-class jobs overseas, and handing control of our critical supply chains to both adversaries and rivals. We increasingly outsourced our sovereignty to international institutions while many nations invested in massive welfare states at the cost of maintaining the ability to defend themselves. This, even as other countries have invested in the most rapid military buildup in all of human history and have not hesitated to use hard power to pursue their own interests. To appease a climate cult, we have imposed energy policies on ourselves that are impoverishing our people,
even as our competitors exploit oil and coal and natural gas and anything else, not just to power their economies, but to use as leverage against our own. And in a pursuit of a world without borders, we opened our doors to an unprecedented wave of mass migration that threatens the cohesion of our societies, the continuity of our culture, and the future of our people. We made these mistakes together. And now, together, we owe it to our people to face those facts and to move forward, to rebuild. Under President Trump, the United States of America will once again take on the task of renewal and restoration, driven by a vision of a future as proud, as sovereign, and as vital as our civilization's past. And while we are prepared, if necessary, to do this alone, it is our preference and it is our hope to do this together with you, our friends here in Europe. For the United States and Europe, we belong together. America was founded 250 years ago, but the roots began here on this continent long before. The men who settled and built the nation of my birth arrived on our shores carrying the memories and the traditions and the Christian faith of their ancestors as a sacred inheritance, an unbreakable link between the old world and the new. We are part of one civilization, Western civilization. We are bound to one another by the deepest bonds that nations could share, forged by centuries of shared history, Christian faith, culture, heritage, language, ancestry, and the sacrifices our forefathers made together for the common civilization to which we have fallen heir. And so this is why we Americans may sometimes come off as a little direct and urgent in our counsel. This is why President Trump demands seriousness and reciprocity from our friends here in Europe. The reason why, my friends, is because we care deeply. We care deeply about your future and ours. And if at times we disagree, our disagreements come from our profound sense of concern about a Europe with which we are connected, not just economically, not just militarily. We are connected spiritually, and we are connected culturally. We want Europe to be strong. We believe that Europe must survive. Because the two great wars of the last century serve for us as history's constant reminder that ultimately our destiny is and will always be intertwined with yours. Because we know that the fate of Europe will never be irrelevant to our own. National security, which this conference is largely about, is not merely a series of technical questions. How much we spend on defense or where, how we deploy it, these are important questions. They are. But they are not the fundamental one. The fundamental question we must answer at the outset is, what exactly are we defending? Because armies do not fight for abstractions. Armies fight for a people. Armies fight for a nation. Armies fight for a way of life. And that is what we are defending. A great civilization that has every reason to be proud of its history, confident of its future, and aims to always be the master of its own economic and political destiny. It was here, in Europe, where the ideas that planted the seeds of liberty that changed the world were born. It was here, in Europe, which gave the world the rule of law, the universities, and the scientific revolution. It was this continent that produced the genius of Mozart and Beethoven, of Dante and Shakespeare, of Michelangelo and Da Vinci, of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. And this is the place where the vaulted ceilings of the Sistine Chapel and the towering spires of the great cathedral in Cologne, they testify not just to the greatness of our past or to a faith in God that inspired these marvels. They foreshadow the wonders that await us in our future. But only if we are unapologetic in our heritage and proud of this common inheritance can we together begin the work of envisioning and shaping our economic and our political future. Deindustrialization was not inevitable. It was a conscious policy choice, a decades-long economic undertaking that stripped our nations of their wealth, of their productive capacity, and of their independence. And the loss of our supply chain sovereignty was not a function of a prosperous and healthy system of global trade. It was foolish. It was a foolish but voluntary transformation of our economy that left us dependent on others for our needs and dangerously vulnerable to crisis. Mass migration isn't some fringe concern of little consequence. It was and continues to be a crisis which is transforming and destabilizing societies all across the West. Together, we can reindustrialize our economies and rebuild our capacity to defend our people. But the work of this new alliance should not be focused just on military cooperation and reclaiming the industries of the past. It should also be focused on together advancing our mutual interests in new frontiers, unshackling our ingenuity, our creativity, and the dynamic spirit to build a new Western century. Commercial space travel and cutting-edge artificial intelligence, industrial automation and flex manufacturing, creating a Western supply chain for critical minerals not vulnerable to extortion from other powers, and a unified effort to compete for market share in the economies of the global South. Together, we can not only take back control of our own industries and supply chains, we can prosper in the areas that will define the 21st century. But we must also gain control of our national borders. Controlling who and how many people enter our countries, this is not an expression of xenophobia. It is not hate. It is a fundamental act of national sovereignty. And the failure to do so is not just an abdication of one of our most basic duties owed to our people. It is an urgent threat to the fabric of our societies and the survival of our civilization itself. And finally, we can no longer place the so-called global order above the vital interests of our people and our nations. We do not need to abandon the system of international cooperation we authored, and we don't need to dismantle the global institutions of the old order that together we built. But these must be reformed. These must be rebuilt. For example, the United Nations still has tremendous potential to be a tool for good in the world. But we cannot ignore that today, on the most pressing matters before us, it has no answers and has played virtually no role. It could not solve the war in Gaza. Instead, it was American leadership that freed captives from barbarians and brought about a fragile truce. It has not solved the war in Ukraine. It took American leadership in partnership with many of the countries here today just to bring the two sides to the table in search of a still elusive peace. It was powerless to constrain the nuclear program of radical Shia clerics in Tehran. That required 14 bombs dropped with precision from American B-2 bombers. And it was unable to address the threat to our security from a narco-terrorist dictator in Venezuela. Instead, it took American special forces to bring this fugitive to justice. In a perfect world, all of these problems and more would be solved by diplomats and strongly worded resolutions. But we do not live in a perfect world, and we cannot continue to allow those who blatantly and openly threaten our citizens and endanger our global stability to shield themselves behind abstractions of international law which they themselves routinely violate. This is the path that President Trump and the United States has embarked upon. It is the path we ask you here in Europe to join us on. It is a path we have walked together before and hope to walk together again. For 5 centuries, before the end of the Second World War, the West had been expanding. Its missionaries, its pilgrims, its soldiers, its explorers pouring out from its shores to cross oceans, settle new continents, build vast empires extending out across the globe. But in 1945, for the first time since the age of Columbus, it was contracting. Europe was in ruins. Half of it lived behind an iron curtain, and the rest looked like it would soon follow. The great Western empires had entered into terminal decline, accelerated by godless communist revolutions and by anti-colonial uprisings that would transform the world and drape the red hammer and sickle across vast swaths of the map in the years to come. Against that backdrop, then as now, many came to believe that the West's age of dominance had come to an end, and that our future was destined to be a faint and feeble echo of our past. But together, our predecessors recognized that decline was a choice, and it was a choice they refused to make. This is what we did together once before, and this is what President Trump and the United States want to do again now, together with you. And this is why we do not want our allies to be weak, because that makes us weaker. We want allies who can defend themselves so that no adversary will ever be tempted to test our collective strength. This is why we do not want our allies to be shackled by guilt and shame. We want allies who are proud of their culture and of their heritage, who understand that we are heirs to the same great and noble civilization, and who together with us are willing and able to defend it. And this is why we do not want allies to rationalize the broken status quo rather than reckon with what is necessary to fix it. For we in America have no interest in being polite and orderly caretakers of the West's managed decline. We do not seek to separate, but to revitalize an old friendship and renew the greatest civilization in human history. What we want is a reinvigorated alliance that recognizes that what has ailed our societies is not just a set of bad policies, but a malaise of hopelessness and complacency. An alliance is the alliance that we want is one that is not paralyzed into inaction by fear. Fear of climate change, fear of war, fear of technology. Instead, we want an alliance that boldly races into the future. And the only fear we have is the fear of the shame of not leaving our nations prouder, stronger, and wealthier for our children. An alliance ready to defend our people, to safeguard our interests, and to preserve the freedom of action that allows us to shape our own destiny. Not one that exists to operate a global welfare state and atone for the purported sins of past generations. An alliance that does not allow its power to be outsourced, constrained, or subordinated to systems beyond its control. One that does not depend on others for the critical necessities of its national life. And one that does not maintain the polite pretense that our way of life is just one among many, and that asks for permission before it acts. And above all, an alliance based on the recognition that we, the West, have inherited together. What we have inherited together is something that is unique and distinctive and irreplaceable, because this, after all, is the very foundation of the transatlantic bond. Acting together in this way, we will not just help recover a sane foreign policy, it will restore to us a clear sense of ourselves. It will restore a place in the world. And in so doing, it will rebuke and deter the forces of civilizational erasure that today menace both America and Europe alike. So in a time of headlines heralding the end of the transatlantic era, let it be known and clear to all that this is neither our goal nor our wish. Because for us Americans, our home may be in the Western Hemisphere, but we will always be a child of Europe. Our story began with an Italian explorer whose adventure into the great unknown to discover a new world brought Christianity to the Americas and became the legend that defined the imagination of our pioneer nation. Our first colonies were built by English settlers, to whom we owe not just the language we speak, but the whole of our political and legal system. Our frontiers were shaped by Scots-Irish, that proud, hardy clan from the hills of Ulster that gave us Davy Crockett and Mark Twain and Teddy Roosevelt and Neil Armstrong. Our great Midwestern heartland was built by German farmers and craftsmen who transformed empty plains into a global agricultural powerhouse. And by the way, dramatically upgraded the quality of American beer. Our expansion into the interior followed the footsteps of French fur traders and explorers whose names, by the way, still adorn the street signs and town names all across the Mississippi Valley. Our horses, our ranches, our rodeos, the entire romance of the cowboy archetype that became synonymous with the American West. These were born in Spain. And our largest and most iconic city was named New Amsterdam before it was named New York. And you know that in the year that my country was founded, Lorenzo and Catalina Giraldi lived in Casal Monferrato in the Kingdom of Piedmont, Sardinia. And Jose and Manuel Arena lived in Sevilla, Spain. I don't know what, if anything, they knew about the 13 colonies which had gained their independence from the British Empire. But here's what I'm certain of. They could have never imagined that 250 years later, one of their direct descendants would be back here today on this continent as the chief diplomat of that infant nation. And yet here I am, reminded by my own story that both our histories and our fates will always be linked. Together, we rebuilt a shattered continent in the wake of 2 devastating world wars. When we found ourselves divided once again by the Iron Curtain, the Free West linked arms with the courageous dissidents struggling against tyranny in the East to defeat Soviet communism. We have fought against each other, then reconciled, then fought, then reconciled again. And we have bled and died side by side on battlefields from Kapyong to Kandahar. And I'm here today to leave it clear that America is charting the path for a new century of prosperity, and that once again, we want to do it together with you, our cherished allies and our oldest friends. We want to do it together with you, with a Europe that is proud of its heritage and of its history, with a Europe that has the spirit of creation and liberty that sent ships out into uncharted seas and birthed our civilization, with a Europe that has the means to defend itself and the will to survive. We should be proud of what we achieved together in the last century, but now we must confront and embrace the opportunities of a new one. Because yesterday is over. The future is inevitable. And our destiny together awaits. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, I'm not sure you heard the sigh of relief through this hall when we were just listening to what I would interpret as a message of reassurance, of partnership. You spoke of intertwined relations between the United States and Europe. Reminds me of statements made decades ago by your predecessors when the discussion was, is actually America a European power? Is America a power in Europe? Thank you for offering this message of reassurance about our partnership. This is actually not the first time that Marco Rubio is here at the Munich Security Conference. He's been here before, a couple of times, but it's the first time he has been, and he is the speaker as Secretary of State. So thank you again. We have only a couple of minutes now for just a few questions. And if I may, we collected questions from the audience. One of the sort of key issues here, yesterday, today, is of course, continues to be the question of how to deal with the war in Ukraine. Many of us in the discussions of the last day, last 24 hours, have voiced their impression that the Russians, let me put it colloquially, the Russians are playing for time. They're not really interested in a meaningful settlement. There is no indication that they're willing to compromise on any of their maximalist objectives. Offer to us, if you could, your assessment of where we are and where you think we can go.
Well, I think where we are at this point is that the issues at play that have to be, here's the good news. The good news is that the issues that need to be confronted to end this war have been narrowed. That's the good news. The bad news is they've been narrowed to the hardest questions to answer, and work remains to be done in that front. I hear your point about, well, the answer is we don't know. We don't know if the Russians are serious about ending the war. They say they are, and under what terms they were willing to do it, and whether we can find terms that are acceptable to Ukraine upon that Russia will always agree to. But we're going to continue to test it. In the meantime, everything else continues to happen. The United States has imposed additional sanctions on Russia's oil. In our conversations with India, we've gotten their commitment to stop buying additional Russian oil. Europe has taken its set of steps moving forward. The Pearl program continues, in which American weaponry is being sold for the Ukrainian war effort. So all these things continue. Nothing has stopped in the interim. So there's no buying of time here in that regard. What we can't answer, but we're going to continue to test, is whether there is an outcome that Ukraine can live with and that Russia will accept. And I would say it's been elusive up to this point. We've made progress in the sense that for the first time, I think, in years, at least at the technical level, there were military officials from both sides that met together last week, and there'll be meetings again on Tuesday, although it may not be the same group of people. Look, we're going to continue to do everything we can to play this role of bringing this war to the end. I don't think anybody in this room would be against a negotiated settlement to this war, so long as the conditions are just and sustainable. And that's what we aim to achieve, and we're going to continue to try to achieve it, even as all these other things continue to happen on the sanctions front and so forth.
Thank you very much. I'm sure if we had more time, there would be many questions on Ukraine. But let me conclude by asking a question about something entirely different. The next speaker here in just a couple of minutes will be the Foreign Minister of China. When you served in the Senate, sir, people considered you a kind of a China hawk.
So did they.
So did they.
Yeah.
We know that there will be, in about 2 months' time, a summit meeting between President Trump and President Xi Jinping. Give us your expectation. Are you optimistic? Can there be a quote-unquote deal with China? What do you expect?
Well, I would say this. The two largest economies in the world, two of the big powers on the planet, we have an obligation to communicate with them and talk, and so do many of you on a bilateral basis as well. I mean, it would be geopolitical malpractice to not be in conversations with China. I would say this, because we're two large countries with huge global interests, our national interests will often not align. Their national interests and ours will not align, and we owe it to the world to try to manage those as best we can, obviously avoiding conflict, both economic and worse. And so it's important for us to have communications with them in that regard. On areas in which our interests are aligned, I think we can work together to make positive impact on the world, and we seek opportunities to do that with them. But we have to have a relationship with China, and many of the countries represented here today are going to have a relationship with China, always understanding that nothing that we agree to could come at the expense of our national interest. And frankly, we expect China to act in their national interest, as we expect every nation state to act in their national interest. And the goal of diplomacy is to try to navigate those times in which our national interests come into conflict with one another, always hoping to do it peacefully. I think we also have a special obligation, because whatever happens between the U.S. and China on trade has a global implication. So there are long-term challenges that we face that we're going to have to confront, that are going to be irritants in our relationship with China. That's not just true for the United States, that's true for the broader West. But I do think we need to try to manage those the best we can to avoid, unnecessary friction if it's possible. But no one is under any illusions. There are some fundamental challenges between our countries and between the West and China that will continue for the foreseeable future for a variety of reasons. And it's some of the things we hope to work together with you on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. We've run out of time. I'm sorry that I can't take questions from all those who wanted to ask questions. Mr. Secretary of State, thank you for this message of reassurance. I think this is much appreciated here in the hall. Let's offer a round of applause. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. This is an important day two of our meeting. Today we will be discussing, among other things, of course, the continued discussion on how to end the Russian war in and on Ukraine. We'll be discussing the conflicts in the Middle East, the war in Sudan, situations in Belarus, in Venezuela, and in other places. We will address transnational challenges, and we will start this morning with the United States, followed by the Chinese perspective, and then we'll open up to the European Union and beyond. It is my particular honor and pleasure now to welcome the speaker who will represent the United States of America. Welcome, Secretary of State Marco Rubio. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. We gather here today as members of a historic alliance, an alliance that saved and changed the world. You know, when this conference began in 1963, it was in a nation, actually it was on a continent, that was divided against itself. The line between communism and freedom ran through the heart of Germany. The first barbed fences of the Berlin Wall had gone up just 2 years prior. And just months before that first conference, before our predecessors first met here in Munich, the Cuban Missile Crisis had brought the world to the brink of nuclear destruction. Even as World War II still burned fresh in the memory of Americans and Europeans alike, we found ourselves staring down the barrel of a new global catastrophe. One with the potential for a new kind of destruction, more apocalyptic and final than anything before in the history of mankind. The time of that first gathering, Soviet communism was on the march. Thousands of years of Western civilization hung in the balance. At that time, victory was far from certain. But we were driven by a common purpose. We were unified not just by what we were fighting against. We were unified by what we were fighting for. And together, Europe and America prevailed. And a continent was rebuilt. Our people prospered. In time, the East and West blocks were reunited. A civilization was once again made whole. That infamous wall that had cleaved this nation into two came down, and with it, an evil empire. And the East and West became one again. But the euphoria of this triumph led us to a dangerous delusion that we had entered, quote, the end of history, that every nation would now be a liberal democracy, that the ties formed by trade and by commerce alone would now replace nationhood, that the rules-based global order, an overused term, would now replace the national interest, and that we would now live in a world without borders where everyone became a citizen of the world. This was a foolish idea that ignored both human nature and it ignored the lessons of over 5,000 years of recorded human history. And it has cost us dearly. In this delusion, we embraced a dogmatic vision of free and unfettered trade, even
as some nations protected their economies and subsidized their companies to systematically undercut ours, shuttering our plants, resulting in large parts of our societies being deindustrialized, shipping millions of working and middle-class jobs overseas, and handing control of our critical supply chains to both adversaries and rivals. We increasingly outsourced our sovereignty to international institutions while many nations invested in massive welfare states at the cost of maintaining the ability to defend themselves. This, even as other countries have invested in the most rapid military buildup in all of human history and have not hesitated to use hard power to pursue their own interests. To appease a climate cult, we have imposed energy policies on ourselves that are impoverishing our people, even as our competitors exploit oil and coal and natural gas and anything else, not just to power their economies, but to use as leverage against our own. And in a pursuit of a world without borders, we opened our doors to an unprecedented wave of mass migration that threatens the cohesion of our societies, the continuity of our culture, and the future of our people. We made these mistakes together. And now, together, we owe it to our people to face those facts and to move forward to rebuild. Under President Trump, the United States of America will once again take on the task of renewal and restoration, driven by a vision of a future as proud, as sovereign, and as vital as our civilization's past. And while we are prepared, if necessary, to do this alone, it is our preference and it is our hope to do this together with you, our friends here in Europe. For the United States and Europe, we belong together. America was founded 250 years ago, but the roots began here on this continent long before. The men who settled and built the nation of my birth arrived on our shores carrying the memories and the traditions and the Christian faith of their ancestors as a sacred inheritance, an unbreakable link between the old world and the new. We are part of one civilization, Western civilization. We are bound to one another by the deepest bonds that nations could share, forged by centuries of shared history, Christian faith, culture, heritage, language, ancestry, and the sacrifices our forefathers made together for the common civilization to which we have fallen heir. And so this is why we Americans may sometimes come off as a little direct and urgent in our counsel. This is why President Trump demands seriousness and reciprocity from our friends here in Europe. The reason why, my friends, is because we care deeply. We care deeply about your future and ours. And if at times we disagree, our disagreements come from our profound sense of concern about a Europe with which we are connected, not just economically, not just militarily. We are connected spiritually, and we are connected culturally. We want Europe to be strong. We believe that Europe must survive, because the two great wars of the last century serve for us as history's constant reminder that ultimately our destiny is and will always be intertwined with yours. Because we know that the fate of Europe will never be irrelevant to our own. National security, which this conference is largely about, is not merely a series of technical questions. How much we spend on defense or where, how we deploy it, these are important questions. They are. But they are not the fundamental one. The fundamental question we must answer at the outset is, what exactly are we defending? Because armies do not fight for abstractions. Armies fight for a people. Armies fight for a nation. Armies fight for a way of life. And that is what we are defending. A great civilization that has every reason to be proud of its history, confident of its future, and aims to always be the master of its own economic and political destiny. It was here, in Europe, where the ideas that planted the seeds of liberty that changed the world were born. It was here, in Europe, which gave the world the rule of law, the universities, and the scientific revolution. It was this continent that produced the genius of Mozart and Beethoven, of Dante and Shakespeare, of Michelangelo and Da Vinci, of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. And this is the place where the vaulted ceilings of the Sistine Chapel and the towering spires of the great cathedral in Cologne, they testify not just to the greatness of our past or to a faith in God that inspired these marvels. They foreshadow the wonders that await us in our future. But only if we are unapologetic in our heritage and proud of this common inheritance can we together begin the work of envisioning and shaping our economic and our political future. Deindustrialization was not inevitable. It was a conscious policy choice, a decades-long economic undertaking that stripped our nations of their wealth, of their productive capacity, and of their independence. And the loss of our supply chain sovereignty was not a function of a prosperous and healthy system of global trade. It was foolish. It was a foolish but voluntary transformation of our economy that left us dependent on others for our needs and dangerously vulnerable to crisis. Mass migration isn't some fringe concern of little consequence. It was and continues to be a crisis which is transforming and destabilizing societies all across the West. Together, we can reindustrialize our economies and rebuild our capacity to defend our people. But the work of this new alliance should not be focused just on military cooperation and reclaiming the industries of the past. It should also be focused on together advancing our mutual interest in new frontiers, unshackling our ingenuity, our creativity, and the dynamic spirit to build a new Western century. Commercial space travel and cutting-edge artificial intelligence, industrial automation and flex manufacturing, creating a Western supply chain for critical minerals not vulnerable to extortion from other powers, and a unified effort to compete for market share in the economies of the global South. Together, we can not only take back control of our own industries and supply chains, we can prosper in the areas that will define the 21st century. But we must also gain control of our national borders. Controlling who and how many people enter our countries, this is not an expression of xenophobia. It is not hate. It is a fundamental act of national sovereignty. And the failure to do so is not just an abdication of one of our most basic duties owed to our people. It is an urgent threat to the fabric of our societies and the survival of our civilization itself. And finally, we can no longer place the so-called global order above the vital interests of our people and our nations. We do not need to abandon the system of international cooperation we authored, and we don't need to dismantle the global institutions of the old order that together we built. But these must be reformed. These must be rebuilt. For example, the United Nations still has tremendous potential to be a tool for good in the world. But we cannot ignore that today, on the most pressing matters before us, it has no answers and has played virtually no role. It could not solve the war in Gaza. Instead, it was American leadership that freed captives from barbarians and brought about a fragile truce. It has not solved the war in Ukraine. It took American leadership in partnership with many of the countries here today just to bring the two sides to the table in search of a still elusive peace. It was powerless to constrain the nuclear program of radical Shia clerics in Tehran. That required 14 bombs dropped with precision from American B-2 bombers. And it was unable to address the threat to our security from a narco-terrorist dictator in Venezuela. Instead, it took American special forces to bring this fugitive to justice. In a perfect world, all of these problems and more would be solved by diplomats and strongly worded resolutions. But we do not live in a perfect world. And we cannot continue to allow those who blatantly and openly threaten our citizens and endanger our global stability to shield themselves behind abstractions of international law which they themselves routinely violate. This is the path that President Trump and the United States has embarked upon. It is the path we ask you here in Europe to join us on. It is a path we have walked together before and hope to walk together again. For 5 centuries, before the end of the Second World War, the West had been expanding. Its missionaries, its pilgrims, its soldiers, its explorers pouring out from its shores to cross oceans, settle new continents, build vast empires extending out across the globe. But in 1945, for the first time since the age of Columbus, it was contracting. Europe was in ruins. Half of it lived behind an iron curtain, and the rest looked like it would soon follow. The great Western empires had entered into terminal decline, accelerated by godless communist revolutions and by anti-colonial uprisings that would transform the world and drape the red hammer and sickle across vast swaths of the map in the years to come. Against that backdrop, then as now, many came to believe that the West's age of dominance had come to an end, and that our future was destined to be a faint and feeble echo of our past. But together, our predecessors recognized that decline was a choice, and it was a choice they refused to make. This is what we did together once before, and this is what President Trump and the United States want to do again now, together with you. And this is why we do not want our allies to be weak, because that makes us weaker. We want allies who can defend themselves so that no adversary will ever be tempted to test our collective strength. This is why we do not want our allies to be shackled by guilt and shame. We want allies who are proud of their culture and of their heritage, who understand that we are heirs to the same great and noble civilization, and who together with us are willing and able to defend it. And this is why we do not want allies to rationalize the broken status quo rather than reckon with what is necessary to fix it. For we in America have no interest in being polite and orderly caretakers of the West's managed decline. We do not seek to separate, but to revitalize an old friendship and renew the greatest civilization in human history. What we want is a reinvigorated alliance that recognizes that what has ailed our societies is not just a set of bad policies, but a malaise of hopelessness and complacency. An alliance is the alliance that we want is one that is not paralyzed into inaction by fear. Fear of climate change, fear of war, fear of technology. Instead, we want an alliance that boldly races into the future. And the only fear we have is the fear of the shame of not leaving our nations prouder, stronger, and wealthier for our children. An alliance ready to defend our people, to safeguard our interests, and to preserve the freedom of action that allows us to shape our own destiny. Not one that exists to operate a global welfare state and atone for the purported sins of past generations. An alliance that does not allow its power to be outsourced, constrained, or subordinated to systems beyond its control. One that does not depend on others for the critical necessities of its national life. And one that does not maintain the polite pretense that our way of life is just one among many, and that asks for permission before it acts. And above all, an alliance based on the recognition that we, the West, have inherited together. What we have inherited together is something that is unique and distinctive and irreplaceable, because this, after all, is the very foundation of the transatlantic bond. Acting together in this way, we will not just help recover a sane foreign policy. It will restore to us a clear sense of ourselves. It will restore a place in the world. And in so doing, it will rebuke and deter the forces of civilizational erasure that today menace both America and Europe alike. So in a time of headlines heralding the end of the transatlantic era, let it be known and clear to all that this is neither our goal nor our wish. Because for us Americans, our home may be in the Western Hemisphere, but we will always be a child of Europe. Our story began with an Italian explorer whose adventure into the great unknown to discover a new world brought Christianity to the Americas and became the legend that defined the imagination of our pioneer nation. Our first colonies were built by English settlers, to whom we owe not just the language we speak, but the whole of our political and legal system. Our frontiers were shaped by Scots-Irish, that proud, hardy clan from the hills of Ulster that gave us Davy Crockett and Mark Twain and Teddy Roosevelt and Neil Armstrong. Our great Midwestern heartland was built by German farmers and craftsmen who transformed empty plains into a global agricultural powerhouse. And by the way, dramatically upgraded the quality of American beer. Our expansion into the interior followed the footsteps of French fur traders and explorers whose names, by the way, still adorn the street signs and town names all across the Mississippi Valley. Our horses, our ranches, our rodeos, the entire romance of the cowboy archetype that became synonymous with the American West. These were born in Spain. And our largest and most iconic city was named New Amsterdam before it was named New York. And you know that in the year that my country was founded, Lorenzo and Catalina Giraldi lived in Casal Monferrato in the Kingdom of Piedmont, Sardinia. And Jose and Manuela Reina lived in Sevilla, Spain. I don't know what, if anything, they knew about the 13 colonies which had gained their independence from the British Empire. But here's what I'm certain of. They could have never imagined that 250 years later, one of their direct descendants would be back here today on this continent as the chief diplomat of that infant nation. And yet here I am, reminded by my own story that both our histories and our fates will always be linked. Together, we rebuilt a shattered continent in the wake of 2 devastating world wars. When we found ourselves divided once again by the Iron Curtain, the Free West linked arms with the courageous dissidents struggling against tyranny in the East to defeat Soviet communism. We have fought against each other, then reconciled, then fought, then reconciled again. And we have bled and died side by side on battlefields from Kapyong to Kandahar. And I'm here today to leave it clear that America is charting the path for a new century of prosperity, and that once again, we want to do it together with you, our cherished allies and our oldest friends. We want to do it together with you, with a Europe that is proud of its heritage and of its history, with a Europe that has the spirit of creation and liberty that sent ships out into uncharted seas and birthed our civilization, with a Europe that has the means to defend itself and the will to survive. We should be proud of what we achieved together in the last century, but now we must confront and embrace the opportunities of a new one. Because yesterday is over. The future is inevitable. And our destiny together awaits. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, I'm not sure you heard the sigh of relief through this hall when we were just listening to what I would interpret as a message of reassurance, of partnership. You spoke of intertwined relations between the United States and Europe reminds me of statements made decades ago by your predecessors when the discussion was, is actually America a European power? Is America a power in Europe? Thank you for offering this message of reassurance about our partnership. This is actually not the first time that Marco Rubio is here at the Munich Security Conference. He's been here before, a couple of times, but it's the first time he has been, and he is the speaker as Secretary of State. So thank you again. We have only a couple of minutes now for just a few questions. And if I may, we collected questions from the audience. One of the sort of key issues here yesterday, today, is of course, continues to be the question of how to deal with the war in Ukraine. Many of us in the discussions of the last day, last 24 hours, have voiced their impression that the Russians, let me put it colloquially, the Russians are playing for time. They're not really interested in a meaningful settlement. There is no indication that they're willing to compromise on any of their maximalist objectives. Offer to us, if you could, your assessment of where we are and where you think we can go.
Well, I think where we are at this point is that the issues at play that have to be, here's the good news. The good news is that the issues that need to be confronted to end this war have been narrowed. That's the good news. The bad news is they've been narrowed to the hardest questions to answer, and work remains to be done in that front. I hear your point about, well, the answer is we don't know. We don't know if the Russians are serious about ending the war. They say they are, and under what terms they were willing to do it, and whether we can find terms that are acceptable to Ukraine upon that Russia will always agree to. But we're going to continue to test it. In the meantime, everything else continues to happen. The United States has imposed additional sanctions on Russia's oil. In our conversations with India, we've gotten their commitment to stop buying additional Russian oil. Europe has taken its set of steps moving forward. The Pearl program continues, in which American weaponry is being sold for the Ukrainian war effort. So all these things continue. Nothing has stopped in the interim. So there's no buying of time here in that regard. What we can't answer, but we're going to continue to test, is whether there is an outcome that Ukraine can live with and that Russia will accept. And I would say it's been elusive up to this point. We've made progress in the sense that for the first time, I think, in years, at least at the technical level, there were military officials from both sides that met together last week, and there'll be meetings again on Tuesday, although it may not be the same group of people. Look, we're going to continue to do everything we can to play this role of bringing this war to the end. I don't think anybody in this room would be against a negotiated settlement to this war so long as the conditions are just and sustainable. And that's what we aim to achieve, and we're going to continue to try to achieve it, even as all these other things continue to happen on the sanctions front and so forth.
Thank you very much. I'm sure if we had more time, there would be many questions on Ukraine. But let me conclude by